Hello, hello, hello. If you can hear us, please let us know. Hello, hello.
Hello and good afternoon here from the slightly storm-shattered Scotland. Where
Yeah, I need to ask, how was Eowyn?
We lost a gate, which wasn't so bad. We lost a ton of tiles, which was the reason why we didn't stream last Friday, because I was concerned a player arrives and a tile literally lands on their head. They would have died purely because I was desperate to roleplay, which felt a little unfair. But down the side, we lost about 5 or 6 tiles. Next door lost a whole bunch of them as well. So, yeah, it wasn't great. I also, and this is the bit that actually hurts me, my summer house got invaded by the winds. A storage box in there of my old Empire armies got blasted apart, and I came in to find miniatures everywhere.
Oh, no.
Mulner troops, all on round bases, because after the death of 8th edition, I made my own war game that used round bases. The Age of Sigmar came. That was actually hilarious. And they were everywhere, which was really, really sad. I picked them all up, put them into the summer house again, and then just hoped they'd survive the night, and they did. But yeah, stinking storms.
Oh man, that is truly beyond tragic. How dare that storm? How dare it come in and just
Looking forward
like
to today's subject, though, which I know is perhaps not related to storms, but is related to what we'll be doing today. Arbaal the Undefeated. I have a lot to say on this one, which is perhaps not expected, because I'm going to go down, at least with my intro, down a completely different route to what I normally do. It's a character that, whilst I deeply love, I have some antipathy for. But it's not antipathy based upon the character and its lore. It's purely because of how the character was used and deployed by Games Workshop.
Yeah, this one's going to be really, really interesting as well, because in the research I was doing for this episode, I realized that this is going to be technically a character a lot of people have been desperately asking for without realizing that he's who they've been asking for. And you might be going, what is he talking about? You'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, let's see where this one ends up. I will warn you ahead of time, as we're sitting here before we go live. This is a character that has very little in the way of real character or depth provided by the lore. We do have some, and that some hints at quite a lot, actually. But it's those hints that are sometimes, let's say, taken to conclusions that aren't fair in some places, and in some places I think we've got a big discussion to have about demons as a whole. But yeah, this is one where we're going to have scant details, but in some respects that tells us potentially a lot as well. So a lot of what we're going to be discussing for Arbaal Undefeated is sort of theory crafting as much as it is actually recalling lore. But it's also going to be a discussion about Khorne's champions and exactly how they express too.
All right, so this should be a fun, good time. I am looking forward to this, especially because this gets us one lord closer to being caught up with good old the most recent Total War thing. So all we'll have after this at some point in the near future will be Gorbad, which will also be a fun one. But we've hit the others pretty well. Well, I guess we have to do a Skull Taker stream as well, but we've talked adjacent to him a good bit. But we'll hit him as well, but we'll definitely, we'll have a little bit of a break before we come back to Khorne. But yeah, should be a really, really good time. I think we can go ahead and knock out some of the super chats that came in like super duper early, and then we'll hop into the intro.
Yeah, sounds perfect. As always, make sure that we post your questions into our chat, but if we have super chats, they will always be coming first, and we're taking those in batches. We don't expect them to take them all at once. So if you do a super chat, don't worry, we will get to it. You might be sitting there going, they've not got to it yet. We will get to it through the course of this stream. It's just that we obviously have a topic at hand, Arbaal the Undefeated, and we want to make sure that we get everything out that we want to discuss concerning that particular character and what he means. And if we answer every super chat as it comes in live, we are inevitably going to fall behind.
Yeah, and thank you, everyone. We will remember to have Andy send a bill to the Celestial College, because they need to they need to have a cap on things.
Especially because I had so much prepared for this Friday. I literally we printed out over 30 sheets of A4 stuff, and it was sitting there just waiting to go. I have good chunks of. In fact, I can show you parts of the character stuff that we've got going.
Oh, that's so exciting!
Oh, wait a minute. Let's see if we've got. While you're doing the first question, I'll see if I can get one of the dungeon tiles. Because it's pretty cool. Oh, there's one of the dungeon tiles. Take a look at all those.
This one's gonna be. I'm very excited for what you're gonna do with it.
Yeah, it's gonna be super fun. So yeah, that's something to look forward to.
Cole Patterson, Baal or Baal was a Canaanite god whose name means Lord who is demonized in the Bible, and thus probably inspired Arbaal's name. But Ar means city in Canaanite, so he's city lord, which doesn't seem fitting at all.
Yeah, so Baal, Cole, I would suggest that Baal is a far deeper god than that alone. I've done quite a lot of religious, let's say, investigations because of various roleplay games that I've been writing for in the past or just presenting to players. And Baal is a character that pops up in some games in some very weird ways, but the real world equivalent is a bit different. But yes, you're absolutely spot on and correct that it does seem likely that Arbaal as a name, when created, I think it was Thomas Prinnan that did Arbaal first time round. It does seem like it may come from there, and a lord of a great city, the Champions of Chaos book, would be an obvious translation of that, but I strongly doubt that is what the intention was beyond creating a name that, and I'm going to be a bit blunt here, sounds chaos unrocking, Arbaal! I think that is a far more likely route to it because it sounds chaosy. Having said that, though, if I ever get a chance to ask Thomas myself, I will do so. He's currently obviously working deep and hard on Trench Crusade, so yeah, so I would not be surprised to see a Baal or Baal like figure probably pop up in that because people really love throwing that out when they're doing demon lord names. Good old Diablo, that's one of the big three. Andres Baranak, a quick call back to the last stream. Sometimes you say that dwarfs look for loopholes in contracts, such as the Stonewall 10 Dwarf Kids High incident. But then you say how they don't look for any loopholes in oaths. Yeah, because they're completely different. A contract and an oath is two very different things. And how can we put this in a context or an example that makes it nice and clear? Loosely speaking, an oath is something that you do absolutely everything in your power to see through by its spirit, not by its letter. But if it's not an oath, then it's all about the letter, not the spirit. They're two very different things. This is like saying that how come oranges taste extremely citrusy and are a fruit, but tomatoes that are also a fruit don't taste citrusy? I mean, you could make that statement, but they're just talking about stuff that have similar words, but actually in practice are very different things. An oath is something that is exceedingly different to, say, a business contract. They're just two completely different aspects of their culture and society, so they don't work by the same rules by any stretch.
Yep, there you go. Bonfoot, is Arbaal obligated to answer a challenge in the form it is issued? For example, would he be required to dance his ass off in a dance battle? So I would say no. We'll get into that when we talk about Arbaal and what he represents as the destroyer and that whole lingering threat of spawndom, which is actually a really important part of his character.
Carry on.
Yeah, it's not a brain dead process. I'll put it that way. Khorne isn't sitting there with like, hey, I technically said you can't lose, so you must like throw yourself relentlessly into every battle and not fail. That's not the term of that situation, because otherwise Arbaal would have fallen to spawndom ages ago.
Yeah, and there's a particular point in his actual Warhammer rules that speaks to that as well. But on this one, if we can, picture Guardians of the Galaxy and the conclusion towards that movie. I can see it now. There's Chris Pratt about to start off the dance-off, and on the other side we have Arbaal glowering, clutching to his giant axe, and he's like, dance off, yeah! And Arbaal cuts him in two and says, hey, I won the dance-off. He doesn't care what your rules are. It just doesn't matter. He's just going to town on you. You could say, I know, I will play a very strategic game of chess, and Arbaal will accept your challenge with his axe. So, yeah. Is he required to answer every challenge? Actually, kind of yes, but it's not according to your rules. It's what he deems a challenge to be, and it is going to be pretty one-sided in most cases.
Honestly, I see Arbaal, if someone challenges him to a dance-off, he just instantly cuts them in half, and him just being like, the Wood Elf dancers were far harder to hit than this man. the dancers of Lorelorn were a far greater foe. This man was pathetic. Sedgemeister, Arbaal the Undefeated? That's not a very good nickname. What if he does get defeated? Arbaal the not quite so undefeated anymore, but never mind. Well, you know,
we're going to get onto that one.
It is, it's definitely a name with a force. You know, he doesn't have to worry anymore about things like names.
Totally. Just before we deal with Schwartz there, just bring up Cole. Thanks very much for confirming. Yes, I kind of gathered, but I was more speaking to everybody else as well to make sure that they knew, because I figured that'd be the case. I mean, just look at your avatar. That does suggest someone who is more interested in classics anyway.
Fair. Schwarza, summon the Grand Cathay, release the armies of Grand Cathay. Hopefully we'll see that here in 2025. GW has like flat out said or revealed that they're coming, which is nice. There was a good while that I was starting to wonder. But
yeah, me too. Well, we have already complained about this one in the past, and I'm super pleased to see that we're actually going to get to see them. I think it will be an interesting test for the old world game as a whole, because this is the first time they're going to be releasing an army that is entirely new, with unique miniatures from top right down to bottom. It's a complete full-scale army release, which is something that we haven't seen for Warhammer for an age.
Yeah, also
absolute age. The last time we had a full new released army was what, Ogre Kingdoms?
For fantasy, yeah.
Yep. Okay, so we're talking a long time ago. So if this army
20 years?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. If this army sells, it's about that actually. It's about 20 years, something like that. If this army sells well, it will speak more to the success of the old world, I think, than any other one of their releases, which in some respects are doing nothing more than adding little extra bits to existing armies. In my case, I have got I've got an easy 10,000 points of Empire here. I've got an easy 10,000 points of Old High Elves here, and that can be easily converted to the old world with just a quick rebase. Job done. I don't need to buy anything, and the old world game would never see my miniature purchases because of that. But if I want to play Cathay, that's it. It's buying tons of miniatures. So I think this will be a super fascinating time to see just how well the old world's doing.
Yep. Diamond, hey guys, off topic. I'm not sure that the Forbidden Fortress new map actually applies. Oh, so this is okay. So this is more for me. We'll have to do this a little bit in a more of a side stream, I think. But there is a lot of really interesting new notes in the updated map that they have now taken back down. Which I'm hoping.
I wonder why.
Yeah, I'm hoping it's so they could get their ducks in a row with poor Alfred and maybe give him credit and stuff, or either that or change things. But I'm guessing that's what's going on with the map right now. But on the new map, there is a mention. They added some new lore for the Forbidden Fortress in Norska, where there's a section when you click on it, it has a little section that talks about how the Forbidden Fortress was built in the times before the Taint of Chaos came to Norska, and that since those days, it eventually ends up falling into the hands of squabbling Chaos champions. And there's been some debate about whether, when I read that, I interpreted that as, oh, this is really interesting because this could be talking about a time where the Norskins are in Norska, but it's not considered tainted by Chaos yet. And others have disagreed with me completely fairly and said, no, this means pre-cataclysm. That's what it means by not tainted by Chaos. I think that's something that I'd like to have more of a nuanced discussion about in a later time, as opposed to taking up a bunch of time on this stream, because I think there's an argument to be had about the exact definition of corrupted by Chaos. Of that, you could argue that means it has to be pre-cataclysm, but I would argue that everything would technically be Chaos corrupted if you're arguing by pre-cataclysm standards. Like the Empire would be Chaos corrupted compared to its pre-cataclysm status. So I don't think that's what it means. But if you think that's what it means, that's totally fair. But I think that's a discussion for a separate thing.
All sounds fair.
Hendrik, what is Arbaal doing around 2512? How to use in Wolfrup? Okay, the easiest way I would say this simply is that as far as we know, he's hanging out up inside the realm of chaos doing things. But the cool thing about that is that means he could show up literally anywhere alarmingly fast, especially if, I don't know, there's a cult of Khorne somewhere in your version of the Empire or the world, and they complete a terrible ritual, and instead of a demon walking out, a man walks out, and they go, uh-oh, and shit gets really fucking scary, and you have to deal with a borderline Empire-ending apocalyptic threat, because Arbaal is a pretty big fucking deal.
Yeah, he is. Bluntly, if he arrives, your PCs are dead.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. They're not going to survive, and that suggests that pardon me, I just suddenly got a cough there. Pardon me.
Well, so I'll say this while he's coughing real quick. Arbaal would make for a really good, kind of how you're supposed to use greater demons. He would work as a very good oncoming storm threat that your PCs have to try and find a way to like. So Arbaal, one thing we know about him that we're going to discuss about him is he gets bored and he avoids things that could theoretically be really bad for him. There are times where he'll just go, all right, I'm done. And he just turns around and leaves. So it would be up to your PCs to try and figure out either his motivations, figure out what's drawing him to wherever they are, and either try and find a way to, if you want to go kind of a fucked up route, try to satisfy him enough that he gets bored and leaves, or try and find a way to make a situation dangerous enough that he averts it and leaves.
Broadly speaking, that's exactly what I was going to say, but in slightly different words. And that's that Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay is very good at presenting players problems that they cannot defeat using combat. And if they try to defeat it using combat, they hit Mario Land and have to use one of their extra lives, i.e. their fate points. If you go against Arbaal, you're going to die. If you go toe-to-toe with him, it's the end of your life. It's as simple as that. PCs, though, can have that sort of problem presented to them in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay because they have extra lives, which means they can face him, lose, and not die in a way that almost certainly wouldn't happen for any normal person in the Warhammer world. So, loosely speaking, he can be added to a game of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay as a enormous thing that has to be tackled, but not through combat, through other means, meaning that they have to utilize their brains, the PCs that is, to come up with cunning ways to get around this potential threat that could be in front of them. Certainly it could be channeled into something else or try to move into a different area, but taking it face on, no.
Magladroth, has Total War added any new lore to Arbaal? Not a lot.
Not really.
Nothing I would say particularly notable. The only thing it adds that I think you could point to as, oh, that's potentially interesting, is that they decided to have it where Arbaal's campaign, his like starting position and what he's doing in the world is that he's fighting his way back down the Road of Skulls, which if you've read the Gotrek and Felix novel, The Road of Skulls, there is an interesting story there about how the Road of Skulls was initially like Khorne's demons fought from like the zenith of the world down to some dwarfhold, and then Grimnir fought his way back up the Road of Skulls and like kind of reconsecrated it for the dwarves. And there have been several attempts from other champions in the past to take the fight back down to the dwarves, and they have all unfortunately failed. Usually at Kadak Kadrin is where they fall. So you could argue that Total War has kind of given Arbaal an alternative outside of what he does in the end times, that he starts coming down the Skull Road to fight his way to Kadak Kadrin and try and destroy the hold, which gives him something to do if you want him to have something to do. That one guy, Arbaal versus Azazel, who wins? That's a very difficult question to answer, I think, because one is a demon prince, one is still mortal, kind of. I don't know.
This is one of those conversations that are very difficult to provide any solid answer for, particularly if you turn to stats, because Arbaal, as I'm going to discuss very soon, is not necessarily what most people expect when it comes to that. So I'd say stat on stat, Azazel's probably got the win, probably. But when it comes to the actual lore of it, I would suggest Arbaal has it easy. And it's one of those things where one thing does not necessarily stack up against the other. And in some respects, Arbaal is the Gotrek of the story in that he just doesn't lose because he has plot armor until the writers decide that he will, meaning that regardless of what his stats are, he would probably take out Azazel because that's just the way that it works. So, tough one to call. Sorry, I can't give an answer that's beyond bullshit.
Rather amusingly, I would add, in tabletop, if Arbaal rolls good on his 2d6 attacks, he'll crush Azazel. If he rolls bad, he loses.
Even then, I don't think he'd crush Azazel.
Oh, that's true. Azazel has he has like a really high ward save.
Yeah, he's good.
Yeah,
totally.
He's hard to hurt.
He is.
All right, moving on here. Guns for Bullets. Arbaal versus Wolfric, who wins? Arbaal by 1,000 billion miles. It's not even close.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, Arbaal would cut him down casually on his way to lunch. That would not be a good fight for Wolfric.
And I'll be tackling some of this in the intro, so do be aware we're not going to dismiss this as a conversation because there is something that needs to be discussed about Arbaal and his position in the great hierarchy of champions of chaos.
Yeah, Diamond, given he is obliged to answer any challenge, and Wolfric is known for challenging people, this seems like these two threads that should have met at some point. It would have been nice. Yeah. Wolfric occupies an interesting position in the end times in that he got a moment, he got to show up, but he gets killed so fast by Valton wielding Galmaraz. It's a very blink and you'll miss it moment, which it's not how I would have liked to use the character.
I think ultimately I agree completely, and you actually highlighted a problem that I have with the end times as a whole, and that is nobody just sat down at the beginning and looked at every single character and said, what do they represent to the game of Warhammer? Who are they? Arbaal the Undefeated is the ultimate character of challenge. And then you look around and your first thing should be then, who does he challenge in the end times? Who does he face? And where does his eventual defeat lie? And you're looking to build a super cool story for that. Someone like Wolfric, you're right, doesn't like to see one down. It would have been great to have Arbaal cut him in two on a battlefield, perhaps where they even thought they were allies, such as the nature of chaos. That would have worked really well. And then ultimately having Arbaal cut down in a way that is perhaps shows his hubris, or perhaps shows his honor, or perhaps shows something else that speaks to that character is much more satisfying than just having an elf cut him down because he's the one that happened to be in the story at the time.
Yep. Darius, Arbaal and many combat-loving characters that are too powerful become apathetic and sad from having no challenge. Sort of like Unohana before she met Zaraki from Bleach. Only character I can think of who's like this potentially is Grimgor. So Arbaal, I think, does fit this theme in a way. Andy has turned to stone. Can you hear me? Can y'all hear me? Maybe that's a better way to put it. Am I the one who's turned to stone, or is Andy the one who's turned to stone? Okay, y'all can hear me. Oh, okay, now there's two Andys. That's interesting. There we go.
Hey, that was weird. My computer just went crazy. I think I might have had a power dip.
Yeah, because there's an extra version of you in the thing.
Well, let's get rid of that.
Oh, there you go. Okay. That was interesting. All right, anyway.
Sorry for that. I'm here.
Yeah.
Am I coming through loud and clear?
Yeah. I can hear you just fine. It's super weird. All right. I think there is definitely something here in regards to Arbaal, which is something we'll discuss in a bit. Grimgor, I actually don't think this fits Grimgor as well. Grimgor is more of an entity that he has such a genuine, deep love for violence that when he is not satiating that desire, he gets angry. Which is very different from Arbaal, who seems to suffer more from a malaise when he's not finding a genuine challenge. Grimgor doesn't care if it's a challenge. Grimgor just wants to fight, which is very different. Like, Grimgor doesn't care if it's an equal fight. He just wants to be killing and beating on something.
And I think there's, for all it's easy to fall into that particular trope for Arbaal, I'm not entirely sure it's the case there either. Largely because Khorne cares not from whence the blood flows. And there's a certain level of difference here in comparison to the standard apathy type. It's just the next challenge is coming, and he's happy to slay towards that, and does. And there's no direct point where it says in the lore, and he got bored, so instead that it was, and he looked for the next challenge, and so it's a slightly different angle to the standard version of that particular character trope. It's just that he keeps pushing and ends up in a rather crazy place.
Yeah. Peter M, does he rank as Khorne's favorite, same as Valkia? He has a similar but different role. We'll discuss that.
Yeah, it's a complete. He's basically Khorne's champion, his favorite champion, which is very different to what Valkia is. Valkia is beloved for a very different reason.
Yeah, they fulfill different roles.
Yeah.
Dylan, apologies has been asked already. Would a tie or a draw be considered a defeat?
Well, it's not a win. There's no such thing as a tie or a draw. You have either won or the fight isn't finished yet.
Yeah, that would be the thing, is that the only way that you could have a tie or a draw would be that either both combatants have killed one another, or the tide of battle has gotten so crazy and stuff that they're kind of pulled apart by the battle, in which case they're just no longer fighting. But it's not, there's not Khorne's not sitting there as a referee being like, oh, that's okay, that's a tie, we'll put that down on his ledger. It's just, does he win or does he not?
It's pretty much as simple as that. Khorne's constantly watching on. This is a character that Khorne is personally invested in.
Rocker Boy Jukebox. It's gonna be fun to see how Games Workshop explains how Arbaal bodied an entire nation of literal gods once In gets their total. Well, you know, it's one of those good old in time dummy things. To be fair, he did have Takala with him. It wasn't just him. That
entire part of the end times I would be happy to completely discard. Now obviously there's large parts of the end times I would discard, but this in particular, that two relatively minor special characters are somehow responsible for wiping out all of the awesomeness of what could be Ind, is, as far as I'm concerned, a nonsense. It needs bigger, greater, deeper lore to make sense of that at all. And as it currently stands, I think it doesn't. So I agree with you. It's going to be fun to see if they do it, because I think you could tell a really good story that would make sense of it, but it wouldn't be the story of Arbaal and Takala taking on Ind. It would be the story of all of Chaos destroying parts of Ind as other parts escape, other parts fight, other parts perhaps turn. The horror of that war would be exceptional.
Yep. Gotrek Gerson, that comparison just got your name put into the book, Umgi. And you know what? Just add it to my ledger. I'm sure I'm in there a lot. Ryan Woodell, how do you both feel about CA's depiction of Arbaal in Total War? Is he underwhelming what you expect or more than you expected? Thanks, lads. I'm pretty pleased with it. I think they did a good job. They gave him, he like runs around facing great mighty opponents. I'm glad they did a good job with his design. Arbaal is a character that, like a lot of characters from this book, they show up and they got a model and a piece of art, and then they kind of vanished into the ether, were essentially replaced by other characters later. So I'm glad that they kind of kept his classic design, where he's one of the few Chaos Warriors in the game that has a very bulky monochrome set of color. And like there's not a lot of color variations, where he almost looks more like a Chaos Space Marine than he does the warriors that we traditionally think about in fantasy, because he's from the older part of fantasy where the models were simpler. And they kept that design, but he looks really, really good. And I'm pretty pleased with it. And he hits like a truck. So I don't know what else to really expect for him. Donovan, Wolfric could have stood a chance if all the other three Chaos Gods. No, I don't know. I don't think that would have saved him. Plus, he lives in the time of Archaon. Their power is literally already behind another champion. Wolfric's getting bodied. I know there are some Wolfric stands out there. He's getting just absolutely bodied.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I'm sure I could create an argument on the other side if I desperately wish to do so, but that would be for the sake of argumentation rather than just taking the basic characters for who they are, what they represent, and what they do. And Arbaal is bluntly ridiculous.
But with that, it is intro time. So Andy's going to take
intro already. Okay, so intro. Now, when it comes to our intros, I often like going back in time and taking us to a previous era. So I'm not going to break that stereotype. I'm going to do exactly that, but I'm going to take a slightly different route to how I normally do it. Normally, I will discuss the characters and where they came from the game, and to a degree, I'm going to do that. But I'm going to take one further step away from the Warhammer world and discuss what the character actually meant for me personally in terms of Warhammer as a whole. Because all the way back in 2000, we're going further. 1995. Oh, wow. So we're going back to 1995 and the 5th edition of Warhammer. And Jervis Johnson was sitting down in the studio coming up with a cunning plan, which was the first world tournament for Warhammer, which took place in 1995, as I recall. You can go check that up yourselves if you wish to do so. And this grand tournament was held down in Nottingham. And there was one player in that tournament who was particularly excited by what it offered, and he came into shop and he played all manner of different Warhammer armies, and his name was Dave. And Dave and I used to speak Warhammer end to end a lot, in particular tactics and how it should be played. And Dave Kane, as his name was, became the first ever Warhammer champion, the first Warhammer Grand Tournament champion, underneath the new rules that Jervis had laid out. And Dave Kane and I spent a long time discussing, in particular, Khorne. Indeed, he enters the Warhammer tournament with a Khorne army at one point. And how we can make a really good balanced Khorne army. And you might say, what has this got to do with Archaon? Well, we were using the army list inside the Realm of Chaos box set for 5th edition of Warhammer to build his Khorne army. Well, he was doing it. He did all the work. I just discussed it with him every once in a while.
By the way, you were correct. It was September 1995.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Good to hear that. And I remember how old I was at the time, so it sounds about right. And we were discussing, in particular, the Chaos Lord of Khorne, because they get super, super expensive in terms of points. They start off at something like 255 points. You don't need to know this. A Mark of Khorne, which is important in a moment, adds a further, I think it's 45 points, 255 base, so 300 points base for a Chaos Lord of Khorne. And the important part here is, what does the Mark of Khorne provide? It provides chaos armor tip to toe, so you've got that arcane rune encrusted armor that everybody knows from their Warhammer pictures of Chaos Warriors, and you get the frenzy trait. Now, frenzy in 5th edition Warhammer kicked ass. It's the same as 4th edition. Many of you out there, if you were around at the time, 4th and 5th edition, will remember this era very well as the Hero Hammer era, where characters largely dominated rather than units the battlefield. And the Chaos Champion of Khorne was notorious for being one of the hardest things the game had to offer. Why? Because not only did you have the 5 attacks that the Chaos Lord of Khorne had, most characters and any other army had a maximum of 4, but they also had the frenzy rule, which doubled it, which meant that your Chaos Lord of Khorne had 10 attacks at their strength and toughness of 5. It was ridiculous. They also had weapon skill 9. They were all kinds of ridiculous. Now, for those of you who don't know Warhammer stats, the stats scaled normally from 1 to 10. So with weapon skill 9 at 5 attacks, most people only got 4 at maximum, doubled to 10. You were a monster in combat. The Chaos Lords of Khorne were monsters. You put them on a Chaos Steed, perhaps a monster with wings so you could fly anywhere you wanted, or somewhat classically a Juggernaut of Khorne, and you were happy. And Dave and I were discussing all different ways that we could build this. But not long after that, the Champions of Chaos army released. Again, 1995 at a guess. Now, the Champions of Chaos army list was quite different to the Realms of Chaos box set, because the Realms of Chaos box set included the big, huge Realms of Chaos book, which was all the detail about chaos, where it came from, how to build your armies. But they didn't have enough space to include all the special characters, because it was pretty much a chock-a-block full box set already. So they added the Chaos Champion characters separately. And in there, we got the character Arbaal the Undefeated. So this is 30 years ago, and I remember this very, very well, because when the box set was released, both Dave and I were keen to see what their Chaos Lord of Khorne was going to be like, because we had been crafting, both for our own armies and just as theory crafter every once in a while when he'd come into the shop and we discussed it, different versions of Lords of Khorne, and they were all horrendous. Because back then, the different number of magic items that you had available to you from the magic box sets was huge. There was like hundreds of artifacts you could choose from. And a Chaos Lord of Khorne could choose any 3 they wanted from across a big spread of artifacts. Meaning that for about 500 points, you could create a character that could kill almost anything. It was a bit silly. And then came Arbaal the Undefeated. And we were very excited by the idea of a Chaos Lord of Khorne who was harder and better than any other Chaos Lord of Khorne. We were like, well, holy crap, how powerful is this character going to be? Flick, 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 flick. We go through to Arbaal the Undefeated. Now, Arbaal the Undefeated was presented as Khorne's personal champion in this book. Effectively, he was the core champion of chaos that Khorne had. And unlike the Chaos Lord of Khorne, he was basically handcrafted to be a perfect example. And we read it and what you could do. And there was immediately a certain amount of, what? Is this it? Because he was expensive. I'm going to guess about 520 points, perhaps? Is that correct? Oh, yes. 500. I remember he used more than 500 because that's what we're bouncing towards. 520 points for...
Oh, no, I meant higher.
Is it 570?
Yes.
570. There we go. 570. Okay, I'm going to guess that his steed is 50 for Destroyer's 50 and 250 for the steed.
250 for the Steam, 25 for
It's only 25 for Destroyer. Well, Destroyer is more of a problem than most people realize. So we got ourselves Arbaal, 570 points. A stupendous amount in comparison to the 300 base for a Chaos Lord of Khorne with 10 attacks at strength 5. And what we got here was a Chaos Lord with one less ballistic skill. He's only ballistic skill 8 in comparison to ballistic skill 9. He's got one less initiative, only initiative 8 in comparison to initiative 9. And because of his special rule, and he's got 2 unique special rules, his special rule are variable number of attacks. So not 5 doubled to 10 with Frenzy. Instead, we got 2d6 attacks. And when Dave and I first saw that, we went, holy shit, yes! 2d6? With 2d6, you'd start off with 7 as your standard number of attacks. Frenzy would take that to 14. And then we read the special rules. The Frenzy did not affect his special rule Destroyer of Khorne, giving him his 2d6 attacks, which means it wasn't doubled. Which means that for Arbaal the Undefeated to even be the same as a basic Chaos Lord of Khorne, he needed to roll 10 on 2d6, or 11 to be slightly better, or 12. Now, he did have 1 strength higher than a standard Chaos Lord of Khorne, strength 6 rather than strength 5, but a simple, really cheap artifact could give you +1 strength anyway. He was, for his points of 570, massively overcosted. And he was also stat on stat with a Chaos Lord of Khorne who was tooled up with 3 magic items of your choice, significantly weaker. And this was a problem. And it's a problem that Dave and I discussed several times because Dave liked Khorne. I also loved Arbaal the Undefeated as a concept, because the concept here was a Chaos Lord of Khorne who had fought so many things and defeated them all, they had decided to go challenge Khorne himself, as you do. That idea is pretty damn fucking cool. He's Khorne's personal champion, and Khorne has pretty much cut off a bit of himself, made that his steed, a giant flesh hound, far bigger than any other flesh hound, and said, that's your hound, go forth and kick ass. And he did, and he was never beaten. But both Dave and I could make a super simple basic Chaos Lord of Khorne that would eat him for breakfast. So we were stunned because the actual point and rule version of him did not match the background at all, in the slightest, by any way, shape, or form. But that didn't stop us trying to make it work, because we did try. Arbaal had a big problem. He has only 2, and let's put this in heavy quotation, magic items, and a Chaos Lord has 3. And his 2 magic items, his first one is Destroyer of Khorne. That is his 2d6 attacks, which don't get Frenzy. And his second one is the Great Hound that he rides, the Hound of Khorne. But he can't choose any other magic items, which means he's immediately at a disadvantage. But we nevertheless spent ages trying to make this work. He would go on to win the first Warhammer tournament. You get loads of articles with Dave. If you go check some old White Dwarfs from around about that era, you'll find Dave popping up every once in a while in a battle report or writing something. Dave and I, because he used to play over at the South East Scotland War Games Club, where he did most of his gaming here in Edinburgh. Dave and I used to chat almost weekly inside the store about different Warhammer armies, but we just could not make Arbaal work. There was no way to make it work, because not only was he super expensive, he had another enormous flaw as a character in the game, and this is a flaw that's actually a benefit for the background and understanding the character as a whole, and that's that he cannot be your general. Because Arbaal the Undefeated isn't a general. He is not a leader of men. Now, that doesn't mean he doesn't lead men into battle. He sits in the front line, kicking ass and chewing gum like any others. Indeed, he's often described as being at the forefront of a big wedge of demons. 100 demons slam up behind him and slam into the gates of Kislev, that sort of idea. But Arbaal the Undefeated himself is not a general. He is a fighter, a captain on the front line if you wish, but he can't be your general. But that means if you're playing a Khorne army, you've got to spend 570 points on him, plus a minimum Chaos Lord, taking you up to almost 1,000 points, meaning that your army has to be a minimum of 2,000 points just to be started, just to include him. And at that point, 2,000 was a standard starting point, up to 3,000 normally. It generally meant that nobody played with Arbaal, and this was a problem. In the years that Arbaal was sitting on the shelves in the store, we sold almost none of him. Almost none. He was Arbaal the unpurchased, Arbaal the unbought, because to actually field him in your army had to be big, and when you did field him, he wasn't very effective. And that meant, and I mean this bluntly, he was the most dusted box set in the shops, because he was the one that picked up the dust and had to be cleaned off again, and very few people purchased him. It was no great surprise that Arbaal the unpurchased, Arbaal the, as Greenie just nicely pops out there, the unwanted, poor Arbaal the unsellable, yes, quite, Arbaal the unpicked up, when it came around to the 6th edition of the game, was not included as one of their special characters. Now, for those of you who don't know the 6th edition of the game, this probably won't surprise you, because the 6th edition generally only added maybe 2 special characters for each one of the armies, and the rest of them had a very short write-up. And the 6th edition, he had a short write-up. It was a nice little short, little sketch saying, Arbaal, it was a copy-paste from the previous edition. Yeah, he's Khorne's champion, he's great, we're not statting him out. Yeah, let's not worry about that. Let's move along the bus now. However, as we move through our 6th and 7th mail order, continued to have this metal miniature that was, bluntly, pretty freaking cool. An enormous fleshhound with a great Chaos Warrior atop it. So, over in mail order side, we got extra stats for him in this era in Citadel Journal. I'm going to say it was the big one for the celebration, so it's probably 50. So, in Citadel Journal, they added stats. And you thought, I remember when this came, it was coming in. Now, the Citadel Journal, as far as everyone was concerned, was a fan-created thing, and it was never allowed in tournaments or anything similar, but it was still nevertheless a super exciting potential extra bit of fun stuff that you could add to your armies at home. And Arbaal got new stats, and I was super excited because hopefully they would take this Destroyer of Khorne rule and fix it. They did not. What they did instead was, now when we move into this edition of Warhammer, Frenzy now adds just +1 attack. That's all it does. So instead of giving him a special rule which allowed him to frenzy more, or be how they described him, he is described as the most bloody, awful fighter that Khorne has. There is none better. And his stats didn't in any way measure up to that. So instead what they did was they gave him 2d3 +1 attacks. So 2d3 +1 averages out at 5, which means on average he was the same as a normal Chaos Lord. What? And worse, sometimes he was less than a normal Chaos Lord. Sometimes he was more. And then Frenzy added an extra +1 on top of that. So bluntly, they just made him almost the same as a normal Chaos Lord. And I remember my balloon being deflated as I read that. It was like, Arbaal the completely rubbish yet again. Unsurprisingly, he did not sell bucket loads after that was released over down in good old mail order, because his stats were, again, fine. But he wasn't how he was described at all in any way, shape or form. And it's fair from my perspective, because I kind of loved him, to say that when I then painted the miniature for the cabinets inside the stores at the time, I spent ages on him to make him look pretty as possible, purely because I wanted folks to buy him because I liked him. Poor Arbaal. Poor Arbaal. Arbaal's awesome, but Arbaal was terrible in the game. And he continued to be so until we hit 8th edition. And by the time we hit 8th edition, I think it's fair to say that that miniature maybe sold 5 or 6 across the UK. Okay, that's a complete lie. They'd sold loads of them, but in comparison to the other Chaos characters, almost none. It was no surprise at all in the slightest that come 8th edition, we did not get an Arbaal the Undefeated. In the 8th edition army list, we have a single mention in the timeline where it goes, yep, Arbaal some 2,300 years ago went, hey, you know what? I've defeated everyone. I'm hiking it into the Chaos Wastes to go literally into the realms of Chaos itself to challenge Khorne because, hey, out here it's no good. And he hikes it out. That's it. We get nothing else at all for him pretty much from that era. He is a character who has been relegated to the smallest side note in the side notes of an army list. And it's not until we hit the end times that Arbaal is given a pretty ignoble end for what is a glorious character, and a character that I think speaks to lots of interesting things about Warhammer that have been loosely not discussed at all, which I would like to discuss to a degree through the course of this stream. And that's that we've got a character that is riding a permanent demon. This is a demon that when it's in the mortal realm does not disappear. This is a demon that is constantly there in a way that absolutely defies the standard rules for demons. And there's a couple of reasons why this might be the case. In one loose description, it's because Arbaal's so strong-willed. In another loose description, it's because it's a part of Khorne, and that somehow makes a difference, as if all demons aren't that anyway. There's very little described there, but there is one nice little description saying that, you know, when he charges, all the demons with him don't disappear. And that speaks to something interesting, and perhaps to the destroyer of Khorne and what it is. Because he really only has two rules. One, he is Khorne's special champion, and he is the destroyer of Khorne. And that means, in terms of the rules, he goes into a massive, incredible frenzy. And the second one is he gets to have that big, huge hound. And that hound does not go. In the end times, he rampages around End. Eventually, I think he hikes up to Middenheim, doesn't he? Get cut down by elves.
So he teleports to Middenheim, and
as you do.
To his credit, he has a pretty awesome fight scene against Caradryan after Caradryan's become the Incarnate of Fire. And Caradryan barely beats him.
And I think this, again, is super fascinating, because Arbaal the Undefeated goes up against a god, effectively, and almost defeats him. And speaks to the character and what it was capable of in a way that the actual stats never reflected. Ever. I am going to be as blunt as I can be when I say this. Arbaal the Undefeated stats in Warhammer Fantasy are weak. They're super strong in comparison to your standard troopers or in comparison to most heroes. But when it comes to special characters, they just do not reflect what the character is capable of doing in terms of the background. But the background is fascinating, because we have a character who spans millennia, thousands of years, not just hundreds, not just scores, but thousands, and a character who has never, ever been beaten in single combat. And that includes him going to the realms of chaos and eventually presenting himself to Khorne himself. And that's immense. Regardless of what his stats may be, he is immense. And I'll admit, much like I was with most of the descriptions in the end times, quite disappointed with his end, while simultaneously kind of glad that at least they let him go off against an elf who was possessed with the power of a god. Fair enough. You know, if you're going to go, that's one way of going, but I still didn't like it. And that brings us up to, finally, Total War, who looked back, as Total War often does, as it begins to slowly but surely suck every last little bit of lore dry from Warhammer, to look back to the old 1990s version of Warhammer and Arbaal himself, and recreated him pretty much as his old miniature was into the game. And I think it's a pretty faithful rendition. When I saw it, I was like, yeah, look at that. That's Arbaal right there. But Arbaal as a character, as we will discuss through this, has been always significantly different to how he's played in the game. And I think that probably will be the case for Total War as well, because ultimately, does the Total War version, if you lose a battle, turn into instant spawn and you lose him forever?
Yes, technically.
That's quite nice.
Yeah, if you lose or flee from a battle with Arbaal, you get a dilemma where it basically says, okay, if you do the lore accurate version, your campaign is immediately over, you lose. But they say, but if you want to keep playing, you can click this other button that gives you a debuff and you can just keep playing. Perfect.
Because that's the last part. Because he is Khorne's chosen, and Khorne is watching him all of the time. All the time. He never isn't watching him. I mean, whatever he's doing, I'm not going to go into all the manner of different stuff Arbaal might be doing, but Khorne's watching him because he's fascinated. He's interested. If you know anything about what the gods are like, he basically is a perfect representation of much of what Khorne very much epitomizes. And he looks down at him and goes, yes, which means that he can't fail because Khorne doesn't fail. And if Arbaal should be defeated, that means Khorne has lost, which is why I hate his end. Because Khorne won. The Chaos Gods won, which means that Arbaal should never have been defeated. because ultimately he is a walking metaphor for Khorne as a whole. I would only have Arbaal fall in the end times if your end time story is the Chaos Gods have been tricked. Khorne has not succeeded. This has all gone wrong, but that isn't the story. The story is that Chaos wins. That being the case, Arbaal the Undefeated, in my head, still claims that title because it's the only thing that makes sense of Khorne's interest in him. Because if Arbaal should ever fall, should ever be defeated, Khorne instantly turns him into spawn. But that's the sort of rule that doesn't actually exist in reality, because he never loses. And by that, I mean the reality of Warhammer. He literally never loses. The reason that rule is there is purely for the tabletop game, because it's fun. Because if Arbaal loses a challenge, he gets turned into spawn, and cool shit happens on the battlefield. That's super fun, but he'll be back next time, because in canon events, he never really loses, because he is a walking metaphor for Khorne. And should he ever be turned into spawn or lose, I would suggest that says more about Khorne than it does necessarily about Arbaal. And that brings us to the modern day. Brings us to now, where here I am, 30 years after I first encountered that character, something like that. I've painted it about 5 times, I think. Painted it once really rather well. And I think to this day, it's a character that the Warhammer game has massively undersold, and the game as a whole has never truly understood. So I think it's going to be super fun for us to drill into everything that Arbaal is over the course of this stream, and for you all to share your opinions as to exactly what you think Arbaal should be as well.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to amend what I said earlier. So earlier, y'all asked, did Total War dramatically change the character? And I said no. But after listening to all that, I realized the answer is actually no. They did dramatically change the character. And we'll talk about why after we get through Super Chats.
Ooh, I'm excited already.
Yeah. So, Darius Rose, with Khorne's love for Valkia is similar to Zaraki, or that's the second time you've brought up those same characters in Bleach. Darius Rose, I think you have some favorites. Zaraki or Unohana and Bleach for each other as brutal combatants that love battle, or the time I saw a chick smash a cave in a guy's skull in a bar with a beer glass. Darius, I don't know what you've been doing the last weekend, but go home.
No, Darius, I would like to first say thanks for making me want to watch Bleach, because I've never got round to it. I, for reasons unknown to me, have never watched Bleach. Really should do.
Make sure to just skip the fillers.
I mean, that's half the case with a ton of anime, though, isn't it? So I'm going to watch it, but I have very little idea what your point is here, so apologies for not understanding it. But thanks very much for the super chat. Appreciated.
Good Lord. Magladrop. So I read that Arbaal challenged Khorne itself. How did he survive the fight? Did he kick down the throne room doors, bloodthirsters flying, demanding a fight? How did he survive a duel with Khorne? We'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that, because I think that is a super fascinating question that we should at least resolve for ourselves, even if the game itself doesn't resolve it, because it is something that we presume happens in some fashion.
Yep. Downman, aha, you fell victim of one of the classic blunders. The most famous is never to get into a Lamborn Cathay, but only slightly less known as this: never go against a Sartosan when death is on the line. Just thought it could fit. Surprise Games Workshop never a Princess Bride reference. Yeah. Games Workshop kind of got like less and less into referential stuff as they aged, which kind of took out some of the fun and magic. You still see a lot in the roleplay game. I would bet if you look carefully, you could probably find a Princess Bride reference somewhere in the roleplay games. Sopanza, Andy, what did they make miniatures from in your youth? Wood? Bone?
Sorry, Panza. Oh, that there's fighting words. But though the first miniature that I bought was a lead alloy, because that's the era I was brought up in. Then it turned white metal during my time there.
Sam Kennedy, Green Knight versus Arbaal. How many Grail Knights would it take to beat Arbaal? Well, so in classic form, depends on the Grail Knight. Grail Knights are very, very complicated. But, I mean, from a genuine lore standpoint, none of them would be able to beat him.
Yeah, if I was writing this, I would probably have Arbaal kill the Green Knight.
Yeah, because the Green Knight
reform.
He doesn't really care if he dies.
Absolutely. So I would almost certainly, if I was doing this, have Arbaal kill the Green Knight in a way that would be utterly demoralizing for the Bretonnians. But Arbaal being Arbaal, he's not the general. It doesn't matter if his army wins or not. The army can lose and he just stomps off to his next battle. Makes very little difference. But yeah, I'd probably have Arbaal win this one.
Yeah, if anything, that would be a way to show off a almost very elven cleverness of the lady and her servants, is the Green Knight luring Arbaal away from a battle, so he's not there.
I can see that.
And yeah, sure, he kills the Green Knight, and maybe some character sees it as like, oh my god, we're doomed. But Arbaal's not there, so the Khorne army or whatever loses, and Arbaal's like, all right, I'm leaving.
In fact, I think that is a perfect way of handling it, at least one perfect way of handling it, which is the Green Knight being the one responsible for siphoning Arbaal off, because Arbaal is looking for those great challenges. And the challenge is issued and Arbaal goes over there rather than dealing with the core fight. Because if he's involved with the core fight, as detailed when he's over in Kislev, he kills not just hundreds, but thousands personally. It's bluntly, unrealistically powerful.
Total War, Arbaal versus Gotrek, who would win? This would be one of those things where they kind of do this in some of the Gotrek Felix stories. When special characters clash, it essentially ends in a draw. Where they'll have this big epic fight, but something, shenanigans, gods messing with things, will separate the two of them, and there will be like an avalanche or some other crazy thing, and they'll be forcefully separated, but both walk away to go on and do other things another day.
Yeah, I agreed in general, because that's exactly how those characters are handled. If I was handling this one in terms of writing the fiction, you would probably have Gotrek bodied in a way that utterly surprises him. The ferocity of Khorne being so beyond his expectation, and Gotrek being bashed again and again and again, getting bloodied and cut up, but for reasons, whatever those reasons may be, the fight is brought to a premature end, meaning Gotrek doesn't lose. It fills him with rage and melancholy, because we know that Gotrek does like to be a bit sullen and be moody about how things. He didn't get his glorious death on one hand, and on his other hand, he was handily beaten in a way that's rare for him. That's a good story point, because showing Gotrek's mortality is a core component of his character. So in this instance, and rarely for these pair-ups, I would suggest that Gotrek is bodied and that Khorne outplays the dwarven gods in this instance, because that's largely how it works. And they are going to lose in that the dwarven gods are going to be beaten by chaos. And this would be the metaphor, the fight that stands for it. And often when you're doing the fiction, the winner is not necessarily determined by stats or even sometimes by story. It's circumstance or whatever the themes of the book at hand are. And in this case, Khorne is about to win the end times. So I think it's absolutely appropriate for Arbaal to body but not kill Gotrek, which is, I think, something that might surprise many fans out there, because many fans generally go for, well, if Gotrek had been here, he would have won it, because they love to do that, particularly because Gotrek is a fan favourite because of the novels. But from a storytelling perspective, I would strongly suggest that Gotrek would be, in this instance, defeated.
Yeah,
and which is a thing to say.
No, I do agree. I think in true classic, what we love about Gotrek and Felix, it would be Felix that manages to find some way to separate them. Like he causes something to happen that separates the two. In that very Gotrek, it's important for us to get away and go fight at this other thing and do something more important than just satisfy your hurt ego. And Gotrek being like, rah, 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 the whole fucking time.
Oh, Gotrek can be so annoyed, but that's perfect.
Arbaal's Mount versus Karanak. So this is actually something that popped up popularly when Karanak showed up. A lot of people were like, wait, this is the Fleshhound special character? I thought Arbaal already had the Fleshhound special character. So interestingly, I would say it would, I think in a fight, I actually think the Hound, like Arbaal's Hound, would be more dangerous. That it's
Karanak's stats. Do I have my hand?
Of that, it's a lot bigger. Karanak, though, is the ultimate hunter. Like, Karanak's whole thing, its whole gimmick, is that it is one of the most gifted hunters in the entire setting, of that it can track you through time, through space, and through any form of, and through your dreams. That's what it is. So, I would actually say that when it comes to just raw power, it's probably going to be Arbaal's Mount, because Arbaal's Mount is way bigger than Karanak is. Because that's like the one thing Total War did not necessarily fit, is that Arbaal's hound is not as big as it should be, because the Arbaal looks like a little guy up on that thing. It's a big fucking hound. Total War made it a little more like, it's big for a flesh hound, but it's not gigantic. Yeah, I would probably put my money on Arbaal's hound.
Yeah, Arbaal's hound is rock hard, even all the way back in the underpowered version. It was a rare example of a mount in Warhammer that was pitched as a mount that was actually considered a monster. As I recall, 4 attacks, weapon skill, I'm going to guess 6, maybe?
Yeah.
At strength 6, probably toughness 5.
6 was...
So, yeah, as mounts go, that's pretty decent. 250 points is not a cheap amount of points. Plus, all the rest.
Big thing was, it ignored all magic weapons.
Yeah, totally.
Flat out ignored them, which is...
Yeah, because of the color of Khorne that's upon it. Magic does pretty much nothing to it, automatically dispelled. Cut a long story short, a rather insanely powerful mount, but then again, all of the flesh hounds have got most of those special rules. But I would say out of the two, this aspect of Khorne is almost certainly the more powerful in a toe-to-toe fight. But this is not the great hunter, not the great prowler, not the one that will be hunting someone down over the course of thousands of miles across space and time itself. And then I add a small extra. Or is it? Is this an aspect of Arbaal's character that's never been properly, let's say, discussed? The fact that he's on a flesh hound, which means when he's got prey, he will find it regardless. He'll be able to hunt it down to wherever it may try and go. So if he catches wind of a great champion, when Arbaal comes, you are destined to find it. It's a little bit like It Follows, if you've watched that movie. It Follows, but on a giant flesh hound coming at a ridiculous speed instead. So, yeah, It Follows, quite a good movie. If you're out there and you like your horror movies, it's a good bit of fun. And yeah, it'd be like that. I have a feeling that there is an untold story of Arbaal, which is once he's on your scent, you're never getting away.
Yeah, the relentless pursuer. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sean Solitz, is Arbaal jealous of Vulcan? Nope. No, not at all. That's not that. Chaos champions, most of them don't work like that. Now there are some. I think if you were dealing with like Nurgle and Slanesh champions, you are more likely to come across aspects of jealousy because of the nature of the relationship with their god. But Khorne and Tzeentch, that tends to be a far more rare dynamic.
Now, would they be angry about the other, angry about being stymied about one thing or another? Sure, there's going to be emotions involved. But when it comes to the emotions of Khorne, you are looking at your base value always being some kind of rage. And the frenzied rage that both of these individuals have is generally put outwards to proving that they are better than anyone else before Khorne. And then every once in a while, Khorne pitches his own against his own. But that's not jealousy. It's just, right, we're fighting each other now. It's time for the blood to flow from my opponent. And sometimes they're pulled apart by Khorne as well, because Khorne enjoys toying with his playthings, because he is, like all of the Chaos Gods, somewhat mercurial, which is funny as an adjective, given it's Mercury, the god. But he is somewhat changeable. He doesn't have a consistent view, because the Chaos Gods are kind of broken in terms of what they represent. They are chaos gods. They are difficult to understand. They are inscrutable in terms of their aims. And sometimes what you would expect to be Khorne's desperate wish to have just a single champion turns out, nah, he's got 50. Why? Because he does. Fuck yeah. But Khorne surely wants them all to fight. Yeah, but they're not. Why? Because they're not. They're fighting other things. I don't understand. Nor should you. It's not meant to have a simple answer. And if you want to see the ultimate expression of it not making sense, it should always be down with Tzeentch. But Khorne is not as simple as many lay him out. And indeed, I would suggest looking back at our, which was the stream, was it? Was the one about...
Brass Citadel.
The Brass Citadel. Go check that one out, because we, for example, in the Brass Citadel stream, go to town to a degree onto a completely different story for where Khorne potentially comes from and where his own initial problems and why he maybe even became a chaos god were sourced. And that, because it's a different story, shows one set of potential metaphorical reasons for why he acts the way he does, but it's only one. There's as many other stories you could create as there are chaos realms sitting there in the realm of chaos itself. So I would suggest that the answer to this is a heavy and strong no.
Yep. All right, so I'm going to take over for a bit because there are a lot of things that we need to talk about with Arbaal. and poor Andy's been winging on there for a good bit. So, Arbaal is a really interesting character in that he is one of those examples that can be really, really fun of a character where there is a lot that's implied about his character, but never directly stated. Which is something we have come across before in Lorebeards, and often allows for a lot of really, really fun theory crafting, and this is going to be no different. So one of the things, and I think the best place for us to start, is Arbaal, as we all know, is a mortal champion. He was a man. He was a human being. But despite that, we don't 100% know where he came from. What we do know is that by the time of 830 years before the formation of the Empire, he was already known as Arbaal the Undefeated. He was already the destroyer of Khorne, and that's when he was like, all right, I'm done with reality. I'm heading to the realm of chaos. So looking at that, there are a couple things worth saying. The first, and I talked to Andy about this a little bit before the stream, is that this is a good point where I could throw a rotten tomato at the wiki.
Again.
For just... So one of the things we talk about a lot on Lorebeards is that the wiki is an interesting resource for Warhammer fans in that it can be very, very useful. It's often great for getting little refreshers. And one of the things that the wiki is good about most of the time is that they tend to try and list sources on things. So it's always good to actually go look on it and say, oh, well, what's the source? I'll go read that instead of just taking the wiki at face value. And this is a really good example because if you go look on the wiki, it very bluntly, matter-of-factly says that he is a Norse character. No, he's not. He's not Norse. More than 95% sure he's not Norse. Mm-hmm. Because the reason the wiki says he's Norse is that they say, oh, well, in the Sea of Claws, if you go to the character creation character for making a Norskin character, one of the recommended first names for a Norskin male-generated character is Arbaal. So he must be Norskin. Which is not the way that logic works, because the way
egg.
Yeah, the way that actually works is Arbaal was a mighty champion who was at the fall of Prague, and the Norskins went, holy shit, that guy's crazy. I should name my son after him. And that's how the name Arbaal moved its way into Norskin culture. Not the other way around.
Yeah, I don't just agree in this one. I agree so strongly that when I see things like that on the wiki, and I almost never visit the wiki, it's generally always someone like Sotek saying, have you seen this thing in the wiki? It's nonsense. And I look it up and I'm like, holy crap, why is that there? Who did that? Always upsets me. But we have a very key fact concerning Arbaal, and that is when he was not so much born, but definitely active in the Warhammer world, and that was almost 900 years before their time of Sigmar, which means that the Norsey tribe probably doesn't exist at all as we understand it. There are human tribes in the area, probably in what is now the north of the Empire, not Norska, but in the north of the Empire. And the likelihood of that being Arbaal, the great Chaos Champion's source people, is very low. It's far more likely to be one of the many Chaos tribes that are making their way around the north of the world, or possibly way in the south, but most likely the north. And that seems a very obvious place to draw him from. You are more likely to have him being a Teutogan or perhaps a Gospodar. So the source of the Middenlanders over in the Empire, or the source of the Kislevites over in Kislev, than you are to have him be a Norse character. The Norse falling to chaos, as we understand it, didn't really happen until post Sigmar's time, or around that area. That's when they truly became the Norse that we understand, as they were driven north into Norska, and the Norsey tribe then got the entirety of the land they moved into, becoming the source of the name Norska, which happened after Sigmar, not before. And they slowly, because of their proximity to chaos in the north, changed over time and became a rather embittered people who had been kicked out by the Empire. Now, inevitably, Games Workshop may change that story at some point, but that's loosely what we have. The chances of him being Norse are almost none. The chances of him being any of the other Chaos tribes, though, very, very high indeed. So he could be from any of those, or indeed from somewhere else, because one of the great mistakes of people is assuming that if it says Chaos Champion on it, that must mean they come from one of the Chaos Champion tribes. No, not at all. Take a look at, say, Egrin von Horseman from exactly the same source. He came from the Empire. Take a look at, say, the biggest character we know, good old ever-chosen himself, Archaon. He came from the Empire. So it's very likely he came from a completely different part of the world and fought his way up to the top of the world to prove himself before Khorne. That being the case, he could be, as was suggested by right at the very beginning of this stream, he could be sourced from some equivalent to a Middle Eastern culture, or somewhere down near the Dragon Isles, or somewhere down near the Border Princes, or indeed in the north of Araby, or the lands of the dead, or anywhere from around there. They are almost as likely as anything else, particularly if you look at the roots of words like Ar and Baal. Now, Ar in particular, it's worth noting one other thing. Ar in Teutogen, that's the language of the Middenlanders, Ar means son of. Absolutely means son of. Ar Ulrich means the son of Ulrich, for example. That's a title for one of the great Ulrican leaders of the cult there, the Ulrican leader, Ar Ulrich. So Arbaal would mean the son of Baal, which is almost certainly, as was noted at the very beginning of this, a potential root for his name, which would mean he could very well be a Teutogen, which is, I think, super fun.
Yeah, I'll talk about that a little more in a second. I just want to point this comment out of, for those of us who can't spend hundreds of dollars buying the book, the wiki is your only source. No, it's not! Use your Google powers. Use Google Fu. The books are old. You can find all of them very, very easily. I'm not going to say exactly where because legal reasons, but they're not that hard to find. You're big boys and girls and non-binary folks. You can figure it out.
But we didn't say that.
Yeah, but I didn't say that legally speaking. But so I actually think that there is a lot of, once again, this is not 100% confirmed anywhere by any stretch of the imagination. There is no official confirmation whatsoever on where Arbaal originally comes from. But what I will say is there would be a lot of strength behind the idea of him being an OG Teutogen, one of the oldest, the earliest examples of the Teutogen culture, of a culture that has always been very warlike, one of the scariest of the original tribes that ends up being, has this relationship with Ulrich as they come down into the old world and they follow him to where it ends up being Middenheim. But the idea, there has always been a very, in my opinion, sadly unexplored relationship between Ulrich and Khorne, of the wolf god versus the hound, the baying hound of Khorne versus the winter wolf of Ulrich. There is a relationship there. There is something going on there. And the idea that Arbaal might represent this old original form, you could argue, of the Teutogens that did follow Khorne before they ended up being drawn to the old world by Ulrich, who has a very fascinatingly complex history in and of himself. We'll have to do a stream just dedicated to him at some point, because he has this really fascinating dichotomy of being a physical entity according to many laws and myths, and that the Ulrichans, according to some myths, did not follow him in the sense of like how the Gospodars heard Kislev calling to them. No, in many stories, he physically led them to Middenheim, as opposed to calling them to Middenheim. And I think that there is a fascinating story there of what that relationship has, and Arbaal also representing this ugly truth behind the OG tribes of the Empire, because the vast majority of the Empire tribes are old Chaos tribes from the Eastern Steppes.
Yeah, I agree. And I might not agree that the vast majority of them are. I would say that some are and some definitely aren't. For example, we have dwarven records that describe clans coming across the World's Edge Mountains to the south. What are the Black Mountains, effectively?
Yeah,
to the
that's
south.
fair.
Others, though, and it's clearly written for the Teutogens, they came across the World's Edge Mountains in largely the place that the Gospodars would do so some 3,000 years later. thousands of years later. I'll get my dates right correct. The Teutogens go down approximately minus 1,000, so 1,000 years before Sigmar, and they fall down across the World's Edge Mountains. As I recall, the quotation says something like fresh blood from a fresh wound, or something like that, like bubbling blood from a fresh wound. They're very much associated with the blood god, and I know that because I wrote it. The entire point of them was the hound wolf association was supposed to be strong in the original Teutogens, and they flooded into the Reich Basin, that's basically where the Empire is today, and modern Kislev, and slaughtered their way across until eventually they found Ulrich's holy hunting grounds around Ulrichsburg, or the Fifth Strike Mountain, the Fauschlag, where they would eventually found Middenheim, where the great white wolves were. And they moved from being what was once a chaos tribe into being a standard human tribe who were worshipping non-chaos gods. So there is a story of conversion here for the Teutogens. And the idea of Arbaal being what they were beforehand is, I think, perfect. I think it's a very good way to ground him into the setting, to give him a story, and to also, if we're looking for really nice stories for the end times, also a way of giving him personal connection to wanting to bring down Middenheim, and ultimately you want to have him face off against our Ulrich himself, or perhaps even Ulrich, as we have our titanic conclusion for a character like this, because he's supposed to be nigh on undefeated for thousands of years, absolutely extraordinary, and having him be killed by an elf at the end, rather ignobly, I would continue to say, is, I think, just a waste. There's no story there. It's just, we need something to kill him, let's choose this. It was utterly arbitrary. And if you want really good stories, you want them to have some sort of personal connection at least. And that, I think, having Al Ulrich beneath his heel and telling him the source of what his peoples are is horrendous. And I love that, potentially given that if he's a purebred Teutogen, that means he is the descendant of Arbaal.
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
I would love that, especially because then you could have that interesting thing of, would Arbaal be impressed with his progeny? Would he be disappointed in what they've become? And him having this really interesting perspective compared to the other Chaos Champions that are there just to destroy it for the sake of destroying it. Arbaal's there for a very personal, these are my descendants, this is my legacy, and how he feels about that, which is really, really interesting.
And I think him slaughtering them all is fine. And this is often when we look at the stories that we're building for our characters, particularly end time ones, we're looking at trying to create personal stories that are kind of horrific, but we often go, well, we want the good guys to have their moment. And in this particular instance, Chaos is going to win. So this is where Arbaal should have been responsible for the downfall of Middenheim, because there's a beautiful story that could be
instead of
told
good old
there.
fucking Teclis. Yeah,
I mean, there is no relation between Teclis and the rest of it. That's nothing more than, we have a character, we're going to use it to do this, rather than we have a character who has a potential story to make this heart-wrenching and horrific. So I broadly agree that having him be Arbaal, the son of Baal, the original clan chief of the old Teutogens, who were once the one of the most bloodthirsty, vicious northern tribes that were renowned for their viciousness, being absolutely sworn to the hound, to Khorne, to fighting, to war, to hunting down, and then a chunk of them being sheared off by Ulrich. That's a story. And Ulrich leading this bloodthirsty group down into what will become the Empire, and using that to found the Empire and ultimately form a bulwark against the North, using chaos against chaos. It's a classic plan of the gods. I love that. And these bloodthirsty entities continue on in the Ulrichans and the Knights of the White Wolf, who are to this day painting their armor red to represent the flesh blood that they will spill when on the battlefield. Their potential roots are written into the story already, which is why I think it would make a really nice tale if we went down that route.
Yeah. So, looking at Arbaal historically, we have obviously a very unknown saga of him fighting for at least decades as he builds up to becoming a Chaos Champion. He earns, while immortal, he earns the Hound of Khorne and the Destroyer of Khorne, the Destroyers, seemingly in a very similar time frame as this ascension as a mortal. Though he does not become a demon prince, he rises up to this very elite, one of the mightiest of all of the mortal warriors, according to the background that we have. And one of the things that's interesting is that the Destroyer of Khorne, as a phrase, is a bit curious because that is his title as well as supposedly the name of the axe.
Yeah, this was messed up a little bit in the journal. Originally, it was his title and his gift. In Warhammer Fantasy Battle, you can get basically chaos rewards where the god themselves goes, well done, pats you on the head, and stamps you in some fashion or another with that god's favor. And it's sometimes arbitrary, in that what you lose a battle in some form of battle, and they gift you a big well done, and you're like, why? Because gods are fickle and weird, and you can't be certain. But when it comes to Khorne, and comes to Arbaal, Arbaal had success after success after success, and gets 3 rewards. Reward number 1 is the Mark of Chaos. This is what all champions of Khorne get. The Mark of Khorne, the rune of Khorne, stamped into his flesh. This, in terms of Warhammer Fantasy Battle terms, means he's going to get chaos armor, and it often grows out of them, which is pretty horrific. It can never be taken off. It's on them forever now. That's number 1. And the second one is Frenzy. All the Chaos Champions of Khorne get this. That's number 1. The next one is the, I would probably say, is the Destroyer. The Hound. Ooh, it's difficult to say which one comes next. Can't be certain. But the second piece that he gets is, let's say, the Destroyer. Now, the Destroyer is very much a gift because he is Khorne's personal champion now. The Destroyer of Khorne. And that is what turns him into a frenzied, extraordinarily powerful warrior. Significantly better than any other Khorne frenzy. Screw the rules. The rules say one thing, which is it's worse, which is absolutely stupid. Or alternatively, we go with what the background says, which is very clear. It turns him into a frothing, enormously powerful warrior that none can stand against as furious blows rain down upon the foes. And the rewrite in the journal, they say that the Destroyer is the axe he carries. And that's where the confusion is stemmed from. But that was as unofficial as you can get. So we only really have one proper source, and that's the Champions of Chaos list, where it's very clearly the gift that he receives. And the last gift he receives is the Hound of Khorne, the aspect of a slice of Khorne himself that he gets to ride into battle. It's an enormous flesh hound, arguably the biggest flesh hound that there is, and it's a truly horrific, monstrous mount. And because it's a demon, that means when we come into the end times, it will get bigger. So as we have great influxes of magic, our massive Chaos Hound will have him riding on, like he's riding a bloody dragon. Alternatively, if we're in a time when magic is very weak, it'll be much more standard, let's say Warhammer Fantasy Battle sized. Because you tend to find that when we move out of Fantasy Battle to truly end time ridiculous Storm of Magic areas, demons get bigger. So that's the last one, and that's it. But if we were building this character fully in, say, for example, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, we use a different set of rules. And this is something that we should definitely discuss loosely. And that is that on average, most champions have at least 7 to 8 rewards. Often more. And this being Khorne, 8 is very common. But 7 or 8 rewards. Not just 3. Fantasy Battle always limits it down because they only ever have, for a Chaos Lord, 3 magic items plus a Mark of Chaos or some equivalent. That's it. And the rewards were lumped into the same sort of rule bracket, meaning you got very few in Fantasy Battle. But if we turn to the roleplay game and we were to build him fully, he would be a far bigger, far broader, and almost certainly far scarier character. So it's worth keeping that in mind, that all we have is a very simple Warhammer 5th edition set of stats for him, which were, I would argue, not necessarily well built, at least in terms of the points that he had, and also reflecting the background. But if we were building him in roleplay, he would have a ton more of stuff that he could do, and rewards that speak to his martial capability and what he does when a challenge goes off. Because he does have one other special rule, which is he must challenge whenever he's in combat, and he must fight. And if he wins the challenge, he challenges again and keeps on challenging until there's none left. And that can mean if you're going against him as a special character on the battlefield and you go up with a unit with 3 characters in it, they're all screwed. It's quite fun.
So one thing that's interesting about Arbaal that I actually really like this. I wish I had the this particular white dwarf on me. But one of the notes about Arbaal, it's a minor note, but the reason I like it is it ties really well into our Brass Citadel stream. Is that so? Apparently, in White Dwarf 188. Arbaal gets a 2-page little focus, which he's on like page, I think it's like page 20 and page 21. And one of the things that's mentioned in it is it talks about Arbaal's specific chaos armor, that his is a little different than most other Chaos champions, in that it is quite literally said to be a ancient suit of Chaos armor that was created in Khorne's forge itself, within the Blood God's domain. It was created within the Brass Citadel. And it's this fancy set of armor, likely because White Dwarf would have little pages dedicated to like the miniature and then talking about the design of the models and stuff like that. But it ties in really well to this idea of that stream, which is awesome, where we talk a lot about Khorne's forges and him as a kind of a smith god in many, many ways. But also, although it didn't receive any special rules other than just being Chaos armor, another one of these great gifts, like Andy talked about, where the armor would quite literally just manifest, even though it has a fascinating history behind it. But I think at this point we have our throughway to talk. So I don't want to talk just yet, I think, because it's going to be a discussion about Arbaal as he goes into the realm of chaos. Instead, I think the next big thing that would be good to talk about, so of that Arbaal accomplishes great things, and unfortunately we don't know the details of, whether it's he threw himself at Cathay, or he was merely winning battles among the various tribes in the north, or he was fighting the Ogre Kingdoms. Andy, you're muted.
Just as a small interrupt, it doesn't say that in that White Dwarf.
Oh, never mind then.
There you go. I'm just checking because I happen to have that one because I've got a White Dwarf archive of my own. And in that one, the armor is marked as being black and burnished brass, but it's not marked as to exactly where it comes from. He is marked as being Khorne's most terrifying champion.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, better than any other. But as no actual mark to the source of the armor, unless I missed it.
No, it might be from this book instead. But I'll read this. I'll read this privately in just a moment because I'll flip through it. But I want to talk about this. So the big thing for Arbaal and the biggest moment for his character is the Siege of Prague. This is probably where he got his biggest cement, I think, in a lot of people's minds that didn't grow up with like the model, the Champions of Chaos book, was his mention at the Siege of Prague, because he plays a huge role in that fight. And it is my sincere hope that this also, Games Workshop will stick to this story so that we'll get him back for the old world, and hopefully with an actual not garbage stat line. Because for the love of God, Games Workshop, randomized attacks is not a good rule. It's a good rule for like units that are a little crappier because they might swing a little higher, like Chaos Spawn. But for Arbaal, please stop using randomized attacks. It sucks.
Or if they are using randomized attacks, the base value is the standard. So that means that anything that he gets on top, showing that he is favored of Khorne and is never worse than any of the other Khornic champions. As it stands, on average, at best, if you go with the best version of his rules, he's the same as a normal Chaos Lord of Khorne, and often he's worse. The answer should be that he is better all the time because he's Khorne's chosen champion. Get ahead of it.
Yeah. So the year is 2302. Or maybe 2301, actually, for the Siege of Prague.
It's 02 for Prague, because they go from Prague right down into Kislev City in the same campaigning year.
Okay, great. So it's 2302 of the Imperial calendar. Prague is under siege. It is a hellish horde, the likes of which has not been seen in centuries, if not longer. And it's, of course, led by good old Azavar Kul, who we're all eagerly awaiting for the day that he gets some details, because he is a surprisingly nebulous entity for how important he is to the setting overall. And Azavar Kul has a number of grand lieutenants. Like many Everchosens, he has one for each of the Chaos Gods, and then he also has like a couple of bonus ones like Valmir Aisling, who goes off and fights the Norskin dwarves to keep them occupied so they don't come to Kislev's aid. But among his champions, such as Valmir the Reaper, who's his Nurgle champion, he has good old fucking Arbaal the Undefeated as one of, if not his ultimate Khorne champions. And Arbaal is present at this battle where you have this big chaos army surrounding Prague, and Prague at this point is a formidable fortress that has not fallen. It's a big old giant walled kick-ass citadel that the Kislevites are defending tooth and nail. It's held out against a lot of chaos incursions. And despite everything that Asvar Kul has brought with him, they can't get into the city. They're leading sorties, they're unleashing siege towers, they're unleashing great spells and all this stuff. But Kislev's natural defenses, the protection of their gods, the ice witches, and all this stuff is doing enough to hold them at bay. And then Arbaal steps up. And Arbaal does something kind of interesting, which is twofold thing. First is that, as Andy mentioned earlier, Arbaal is spoken that he leads a great charge at the head of a host of demons. And the other thing he does that I think speaks to a part of his character that I'm going to dial in more on in a second is that he roars out to all of the other mortals around him to throw. He has this epic quote where he basically says something along the lines of, throw yourselves at their gates to the glory of Khorne, throw yourselves forward, die willingly, make a moat of bodies that we will climb up and take the walls. And he attacks the gates. And it is said that so many people die on the approach to Kislev's gates because Kislev is just, Prague had an excellent kill column as you tried to approach the gates. That Arbaal's hound is literally climbing up a mound of corpses alongside the demons, and they are able to, either by going over the walls or finding their way finally to the gate, they're able to take the gate and force it open. This is now Total War. This is one of the there's a couple things that Total War adds to Arbaal that I love, and this is one of them. Because Total War takes this idea and evolves it in a really fascinating way. Because a lot of people don't know that if you actually go and read all of the little abilities and mouse over things, they add lore blurbs for a lot of things. And one of the abilities that they add for Arbaal that they talk about a bit is something known as the Eye of Khorne. And it talks about that Khorne watches Arbaal at all times. He always has some of his gaze focused on Arbaal because Arbaal cannot fail. Arbaal must be watched because he's constantly yelling out challenges, calling for Khorne's attention. And the way this ability manifests is that Khorne's eye isn't just on Arbaal. It's on everyone around Arbaal. So if anyone near Arbaal fails, if they fail in a duel, if they turn their gaze, or if they flee, if they try to fall back, Khorne hits them with Arbaal's curse and they spawnify. And the people around Arbaal, as they fail in duels, or they fall back in terror, or they try and flee to save themselves, instead of fleeing from them, when you would see Arbaal on the battlefield and he's marching forward, people, whether they're allies or enemies, and this I think works well for his story. When Arbaal is screaming at his warriors, charge the gate, make a mound of bodies for me to ride up, those that would turn and flee from that, who would be afraid of dying, would immediately collapse on the ground as they are overwhelmed by spawndom, and limbs are, they're getting extra mouths and limbs and tentacles and all this stuff. So either you go forward and try and earn the glory of the gods and die willingly, or you don't, and you are transformed into a horrible, disgusting, repulsive, nightmarish entity.
A mindless monster that is as damaging as Arbaal sometimes, because Chaos Spawn can be terrifying. And that, I think, is super fascinating. It turns Arbaal from more than just he is a personal champion of Khorne to being a representation of everything that it is to be Khorne on the battlefield. You are either going to die in a mighty, heroic conflict, heroic from their perspective, or alternatively, you will be cursed forever to turn into a monster of absolute mindless murder as you just lash out all around, Khorne cares not from whence the blood flows, meaning that what may appear to be a unit of, like, I don't know, 200 Chaos Marauders suddenly turns into a unit of 200 Hell Beasts that murder everything that comes close, which is pretty cool. And on top of that, let's not forget, because I think it is a core component of who Arbaal is. When Arbaal is bellowing his challenges towards the gates of Kislev, he is at the head of an enormous unit of demons. And generally, Arbaal is perceived, at least in the background at least, as being someone that when you're with him, you do not suffer from the same instability if you're a demon that others do. I'm pretty convinced this is to do with the Hound of Khorne itself. It is grounded in reality, meaning that where other deities, to get their demons into place, they're going to be doing things like great rituals, and that's only going to allow them to stay for a while as long as there's magic in the area. As long as Arbaal is there slaying, demons are going to respond from this, and they're going to be coming in and after him. It's potentially horrific, because we have ourselves effectively a potential demon spawner of Khorne.
Yeah, so they actually add to this storyline as well in Total War with a quote I actually really, really like, which has a note that says, "What devotions a demon prince garners by dint of his miasmic aura, Arbaal achieves sheerly by the Arbaal achieves by the sheer might of his will." In regards to demons are literally able to be grounded to reality around him.
And I think that is just such a great way of adding extra detail to this character, because what starts off with nothing more than he's got a big flesh hound of Khorne, and then the first question that comes from that, then why doesn't it disappear? Because they do. Demons don't last in the material realm all that long. It requires some extraordinary event, a great swelling of magic, or in Khorne's case, a great swelling of conflict of some kind. Blood must be flowing. Khorne's will must be in the area for some reason, and that's not going to be the case for a good chunk of Arbaal's existence. So why the hell doesn't his hound just piss off somewhere because he can't stay? And the answer is Arbaal, and the destroyer that he is, the manifestation of Khorne's will that he is. And that has ramifications. It means that all the demons around him will continue as he grounds them into reality, or if you want to view it a different way, the realm of chaos itself is around him. And is exacerbated and made stronger as he starts to slay. And as he does that, the blood that he causes to flow in turn causes demons to summon into where he is and to manifest, allowing him to lead, in Prague in particular, an enormous horde of demons directly at that gate. He breaks the gate. He breaks the siege of Prague. He is responsible for turning a battle that Azavar Kul himself may have not necessarily failed at, because let's be honest, he had a pretty big horde, but it certainly would have slowed him down, stymied him, made this particular holdout in the north last far, far longer. Arbaal comes from the realm of chaos itself, because this is the first time we get a real awareness of him after having gone to the realm of chaos. He comes from the realm of chaos. Demons are heralded by his very appearance. He bellows challenges and then is personally responsible, so go the tales, for killing thousands as he climbs his way up the piles of corpses and slays from side to side to side. Demons popping up all around, howling for more blood. It is a horrific moment for Kislev and a true testament for how cool Arbaal is as a character, which is why maybe I get a little bit upset with how they ended it for him.
Yeah, and just to reinforce as well, the idea of you're facing, like, if you're a general watching Arbaal, you're a Kislev, you're in Prague, you're a general screaming them to hold the gates, screaming them to push this guy back. Arbaal not only gets in and there are demons pouring in after him, demons manifesting around him, but if anyone gives in, if their resolve breaks, because holy shit, this guy's murdering everyone around me and they're demons, you turn into a chaos spawn, which just makes him such a perfect one-man army, which is what he's supposed to be, of that he literally alters the game around him. And the idea, honestly, a lot of people I don't think will really understand without us hammering in on it, how bizarre and insanely powerful it is for a mortal to be able, through his sheer presence, to allow demons to just happen. and ground themselves. Like that is almost kind of like Andy mentioned. That is almost like he is a miniature Chaos Gate in and of himself, which would mean, if anything, that he would be like drenched in sorcery around him, despite the fact that he would also be deflecting it, because the brass collar protects him and his mount. Of that, it's such a fascinating character when you consider it, because a lot of this, once again, it's not directly stated; it's all implied, but not directly focused on. The other thing about Arbaal that I think is...
Should we do super chats before we go into another thing?
Yes. Let's
get super chats.
I was
because
already
it's super easy to just wander off into new areas. We should. So he pulls up the next one. We'll just conclude on that one. The Arbaal is a one-man army, but not a general. The Arbaal is a leader of demons, not because he tells demons what to do, but because demons are manifested by his deeds. The things that he does so impress the blood god, so are the blood god, that his demons start manifesting around him. And when he goes, almost nothing can stop him. And if you break from him, it's very likely you will become spawn yourself. It's horrible.
Yes. All right, so getting caught up on these here, we've got It Follows. No, Lord, it's coming. Yeah, he do be that. Necromancer, how does Arbaal rank in terms of Khorne's fighters? So, like Andy kind of mentioned earlier, lore-wise, he's at the tippy top. Absolute tippy top. Like, he's up there with Demon Princes, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, easily. In fact, I would argue that he has fought and defeated more Demon Princes than we probably realize, to be who he is. He is Khorne's ultimate mortal champion. There is no better. And even when you go to immortality, the demons themselves have been struck down by him, as he has fought his way through the realms of chaos to be at the foot of Khorne's throne and not died. Any who have gone before him have been defeated. So the answer to this is as simple as it can be. It doesn't matter what his stats are. He's never lost. He is number one. So yeah, truly horrendous in terms of his capabilities.
Yep, and he's up there. Darius Rose, Arbaal's Hound of Khorne versus my Chiweenie dog. Now that's a fight. The Chiweenie
dog will easily win.
Yeah, it has the spirit, right? Donovan, so just to clarify something, were there humans in Norsca prior to the Norsea arriving? If yes, I assume all the Norsea just intermixed with all these people when they arrived, and so they all just kind of became Norskins, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, I agree. I think the Norsea are an invading people if we go with the standard timeline that we have, and they invaded approximately at the time of Sigmar. Having said that, though, there's almost certainly some of them in the Norscan area, but probably not. It depends which version of the tale you go with. But they don't arrive till later. Now, were there humans inside what is modern-day Norsca before that? The answer is, again, probably yes, and that they were overtaken by the Norsea in the same way that inside the Reich Basin, before the arrival of the Norsea, before the arrival of the Teutogens or the Umberigans or the Udoses or any of the tribes that formed the empire, there were already peoples there, the most famous of which are the Belfani tribe. The Belfani tribe that were effectively wiped out by the invasion of all the others, but in truth interbred with and mixed with the other tribes and continued on into the modern day empire as part of, say, for example, the great Druidic families, many of which are tied through to the Jade College. So even they, the Belfani, this ancient people, still manifest in modern lore. So I would suggest that Norsca is just missing parts of its lore. There's almost certainly a good chunk of original peoples who were once there that the Norsea moved in and effectively invaded or were driven into. So yes is probably the answer.
Yep. Let's see. We've got from Darius, with warlike people such as the Kurgan chosen to fall to chaos, since their Gospodari. With warlike people such as the Kurgan chosen to fall to chaos, since their Gospodar cousins were brutal. Also, sorry for bleach references, seems fitting because both Unaha and Zaraki are very corny. We get it.
Darius,
we
you
get
have to get it in there.
He's like, I gotta slip it in.
But yeah, I think the tribes of chaos are super fascinating because I remember in 6th edition they were pretty much wiped out. And by that I mean, at the Cataclysm, it was only demons and nothing else come 6th edition of Warhammer that effectively harassed and harried down southwards towards the elves, the dwarves, and everything else. That overwrote the earlier edition where humans were there from the very beginning, and that the first ever chosen was Morcar, the human, who faced off against Inarian, which is a very different view to what 6th edition said. And then later editions went, you know what, actually, no, humans have been around right since the very beginning, and they were part of the great chaos hordes that fell. So, yeah, the original Morcar could exist, but they never went back to that, and they simply said, Morcar first ever chosen is still in the time of Sigmar, probably. Oh, heck, let's not think about it too much. So there's no real ever chosen thrown back. Loosely speaking, as the lore currently stands, we have had tribes of chaos since the Cataclysm in the north, and that the first tribes of chaos almost all swore to Be'lakor. And most of the tribes in the north once swore to Be'lakor. And all the greater demons that eventually became demon princes there all swore to Be'lakor. And then Be'lakor, in his hubris, rose too high, got cut down, and then it all fragmented across the northern Chaos Waste, where they then moved towards a whole bunch of other gods. And Arbaal came from one of those remainder tribes who in ancient times probably swore to Be'lakor. Now, in our current preferred story, it would probably have been what is now known as the Teutogan tribe that would have been where Arbaal came from. That's a tribe that got separated from the northern tribes, came down into the Empire, and over the course of centuries, completely converted from Chaos worship through to Ulrican worship.
Mm-hmm.
Whew. Quite a fun story, really.
Gun for bullets. So you could say the Arbaal is somewhat power equivalent to a greater demon in mortal form.
Yeah, I think the big problem with Arbaal with his rules is that he doesn't have a one-hit kills rule. He should have a rule that if he rolls well, he's got killing blow or some equivalent, which means when he rolls 6s or whatever, he hits. Now, in his initial rules, he's basically got one attack. If it hits, it turns into 2d6 attacks, and away he goes. And that should be, he's got an attack or some form of attacks that when they hit, you die, because he's that good. He doesn't need that many attacks to make that work. We've now got ourselves a killing blow rule that I think would absolutely work, and that goes against anything. And the thing that would make Arbaal effective, the destroyer rule particularly effective, is it destroys all ward saves. Meaning that when it kills you, done. Oh, you found it? Is that the Chaos Warrior one?
Yeah, so his armor was forged. Yeah, so it's literally hidden in a little novel. So yes, his armor was forged in Khorne's forges.
Excellent. That's perfect.
That was a bitch to find.
Well done. Good job. It's almost starting to be out there. End Times book. I haven't read that for so long. No, that's good. That also suggests as well perhaps where he got it. He either got it earlier and it was given to him, and perhaps that even speaks to how he got into the realm of chaos. I think it's almost certain that he got into it because of the Fleshhound he was riding. It allowed him to ride into the actual realms themselves because it is a demon, granting him access to a place that most mortals could never ever achieve, and his chaos armor, having been forged over there, would allow him to survive this ridiculously difficult environment that would pervert, twist, and change almost anyone that entered it, allowing him to then continue on his unbeaten reign, his unbeaten string of conflicts as he pushes into the realms of chaos.
Yeah, and once again, makes us seem very smart, because that ties so well into our Brass Citadel stream, it's not even funny.
It's almost like we planned it.
Arbaal versus Abarash, who would win? That is, I think that could. I think if you remove the narrative element, which is stupid to do, but if you do it, I think it's anybody's game. If you keep the narrative element, you have to have a very, very good reason for Arbaal to lose, whereas Abarash can just lose.
Yeah, I think that. If I was writing this one, it would be Abarash cuts him to ribbons and Arbaal laughs, for Khorne cares not from whence the blood flows, bringing Khorne's attention to this particular battle. As Arbaal, just the more he's cut up, the harder he gets, and the more powerful he gets, and the more Abarash finds himself on the back foot. And unexpectedly, Abarash, realizing that this is almost certainly going to be his end, flees. So it's not that Arbaal strictly defeats him, it's that Abarash can't beat him and tries.
Yeah. Tyrant,
Turn it into a blood story.
Is Khorne worship different in fantasy? Khorne's champions in 40k just seem a lot less collected and coherent to me than they do in fantasy. I think so.
Actually, no. 40k has depicted Khorne in a variety of ways. And in the totalum of 40k depictions of Khorne, we have examples of, for example, Chaos Legions, and the captains of, for example, the World Eaters, sending messages to their counterparts, basically saying, that was a good fight, well done, son. Here's your medal. Just like it was back in the old days. And the Marines were seeing each other for exactly who they were in the great... well, the Horus Heresy first time round. But they're not always depicted as frothing monsters. But many times they are as well, and the same is the case in Warhammer, where in Warhammer they're not always depicted as frothing monsters, but many of them absolutely are. So I would say that both of them have handled Khorne in broadly the same way, and different writers have taken different routes towards answering what they think Khorne should be. And many, when they look at Khorne, just see pure rage and frenzy, and they will write that for either fantasy or 40k. And then another writer will come along afterwards and say, no, this time I'm going to depict martial honor, or this time I'm going to depict a different version of what Khorne may be. And when we examine all of Khorne, us sitting here with our big Lorebeards, it's very easy for us to see, very easy for it to sound like Khorne is actually this god who is far more, let's say, less frenzied than generally depicted. But we're discussing individual depictions amongst thousands. And amongst the thousands, you tend to find that the frenzy wins out.
Yeah, and one of the things that I would say is that as the settings have continued to grow and advance, I think in 40k a lot of the Chaos Gods, especially as they've been narrowing in on making God-specific books, which is a fairly recent change to 40k, like in the most recent edition, they've been getting a little more Flanderized, where the Khorne, a lot of the special characters. Like, you go look at like the special characters for Khorne, and it's like, okay, none of these guys seem capable really of thinking. Where it's like the I forget what his name is, but like the mortal guy whose whole thing is that he'll backstab and kill anybody that gets near him. And then you got Angron, who's just a monster at this point that doesn't really seem to think at all. Whereas in Age of Sigmar, there's a lot more nuance and a lot more going on. But I think that's just because Age of Sigmar is... Fantasy has had a lot more time, I think, to play around with working with the god factions as their individual idea. And in Age of Sigmar, it's been there since the beginning. So they've been sitting on it for years. So it's settled down, and now more writers are coming in going, oh, well, we've already done this, I'm going to do something different. Whereas 40k is actually fairly recent to like really separating all of these things. So you're dealing with a lot more extreme examples. I think if you give it enough time, it'll start to settle down and you'll start to see more nuance.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Each setting, it goes in peaks and troughs as different writers take different views.
Yeah. Necromancer Cobalt, would a fitting end to Arbaal be him being so far up his own ass as being undefeated that he challenges a greater demon or Khorne himself? So we'll get to this in a second, because him challenging Khorne is a part of his story.
Absolutely is. And I wouldn't really describe it as being so far up his own ass about being undefeated. He's not a creature of pride. Pride is very much not a component of how Khorne often manifests. He's a creature of pure, unadulterated rage and fury, and it's not necessarily a pillar of towering confidence in his own abilities. It's just there is something before him that will be removed, and he will do everything in his power to do so until he dies, gnashing at his shield if necessary, to use a good old Norskin metaphor. But I wouldn't necessarily describe him as so far up his own ass. It's a very human way of viewing him, and I don't think he's really human as we understand such matters anymore. He's gone beyond that to being almost a pure aspect of Khorne. He is Khorne made manifest. It's not so much that his gifts that he has received from Khorne make him better because Khorne's given them to him. It's that they are his gifts because that is who he is, and that is what he represents, and that is how he works. Like the Incredible Hulk, he just seems to keep on going and getting stronger the more he fights, the more that the blood spills. Khorne watches him, not because he somehow summons Khorne by his presence. It's that he is Khorne in some respects, his mortal manifestation. In some respects, that's why he never becomes a demon prince, because he is a perfect example of what every Khorne wishes for his material component. You could argue in some respects he's a physical material demon. Hell, he rides a demon. He is something that's gone far beyond his mortal beginnings. That much is certain.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting. Arbaal is a great character for me personally, because he's a lot like Valkia in that when you look at them, you go, why isn't this character a full-on demon prince? Like, why are they still mortal? And there's an answer there, which is that there is something about their mortality that Khorne sees as a strength. There's something about it that Khorne seems to understand would almost weaken them by making them into demons, which is genuinely fascinating, because you would think Khorne would not have restraint. That's not often something you think of when Khorne. You think of anything, he would be the least restrained of the gods. But in reality, once again, tying back to our Citadel screen, there is a cold, calculating cleverness sometimes to the way he handles his champions.
Yeah, Khorne is looking for the blood to flow, and it's hard to do that if you're just dealing with metaphysical blood. The actual blood flowing happens in the material realm. In some respects, becoming a demon prince and removing yourself from that is a weakening. It is a differential that the other chaos gods do not necessarily see. Khorne abhors and moves beyond magic, but his champions also do not necessarily have demonhood as their ultimate end, but they do have immortality. He is millennia old. He will keep on going until the end of time. So what's the difference, really? He's material. He can walk the material plane in the way that demons cannot. He is much more powerful than a demon prince because of this when it comes to what he can do on the material plane. And I do mean significantly more powerful than a demon prince. A demon prince can be banished. Magic can be used to get rid of it entirely because it doesn't belong on this plane. He is immune to such magic because he is from this plane. It makes him better than a demon prince. Now, demon princes have their own place and they fight their own wars, but Arbaal is not fighting the war of the realms of chaos, but he has been on the front line of that war because he's crossed over to both sides. And then when he comes back and continues to fight the war here, he is still material. There is no wizard that can get rid of him. And that's not because he's got a collar of Khorne and he's immune to magic. That's because he is mortal. But by that I mean he's from the mortal planes and he never ascended. And because of that, in many respects, he is much more powerful. And the same is the case for kinda with Valkia, although Valkia, as we've described, sort of skirts the actually she's a demon prince, actually she isn't, depending upon which book you go with. But I think speaks to the same general Khorne position that demon princehood is just one manifestation of top tier. Another top tier is the immortality of battlefield, of the immortality of war that Khorne grants to his greatest champions. And this is what Arbaal is. He is the peak champion. There is nothing better than him, which would argue that he is better in Khorne's eyes to many, if not most, of his demon princes.
Yeah, and one of the things that's kind of crazy to think about with Arbaal is just how fucking old he is, even by chaos standards.
He really is.
I mean, a lot of mortal chaos characters, they either ascend or they're not that old because it's a deadly career. Like, you're going to die eventually. And when you look at like most of his compatriots, the vast majority of them are like 100 years old, couple 100 years old. Arbaal is like the only chaos champion I can think of off the top of my head that has him beaten age-wise is like fucking T'Challa, and she's an elf. And she like can't become a demon princess because of go watch her stream.
And I would argue that he's actually probably older than her in terms of overall age, because Arbaal has tread the realms of chaos and she has not. He has tread the timeless realms of the warp itself, and that suggests that he has fought on worlds across the multiverse, for want of a better description. Arbaal, much like Archaon when we move over towards Age of Sigmar, has gone from world to world to world through the realms of chaos, fighting for Khorne everywhere, until eventually he comes back and fights for Khorne here in the Warhammer world, and through the realms of chaos arrives at the gates of Kislev, and then from there arrives in the end times until eventually Khorne wins.
Gates of Prague, but yeah.
Yeah, the Gates of Prague, pardon me. And ultimately, we've got a character who is possibly tens of thousands of years old. And that would absolutely fit the background, because we have multiple examples of demons that have tread both, for example, 40k and Warhammer. Arbaal, to me, seems very likely he fought side by side with World Eaters. It would not be beyond the capability of the lore for that to occur, because he comes from and has gone to Khorne's side, and from Khorne's side you can go anywhere. And as we know from other backgrounds, World of Age of Sigmar, for example, that means all the various bubbles of reality where the Chaos Gods are fighting are at his beck and call, are places he could go prove himself, and likely he has.
10,000 ants. If a Khorne champion hunted down a specific foe in order to test himself, but he found that foe sleeping or incapacitated, would he allow him to prep?
No.
I think, generally speaking, no, because you have to remember, Khorne is not a god of honor. A lot of people think that he is, because there have been some interpretations that way.
There are many, totally.
But Khorne doesn't care. That is like the core focus of Khorne is he does not care how you get the kill as long as there is a kill.
Yeah. Khorne cares not from whence the blood flows. So Khorne doesn't care, but the individual champion may. And that's cool, because some champions of Khorne are honorable. Some champions of Khorne, for example, will allow them to stand up because they want to have the best fight they possibly can, and then tear them to ribbons when they're at their best. Sure, some champions will do that. But if we just talk to the core of Khorne, that is, no, he literally doesn't care. Tear them to shreds, tear them to ribbons. If the blood is flowing, Khorne is happy, and most champions are also happy with that. And that is I would say, the ground point. That's where we start from. But from that relatively solid basis, we can move up and build in lots of different ways for individual champions and how they might express. Arbaal, we don't have a direct description of how he'd handle it, but we do have lots of indirect examples with his overall story, and that would be he just goes.
Yeah,
he's
Arbaal,
not waiting. He's filled with frenzy.
Arbaal is a win at all costs kind of individual, I would say, especially because there is a very particular danger lurking over his head, and he's very keenly aware of it. Arbaal knows about the contract that being the destroyer carries. Now, a good example of a character that probably would wait is Skulltaker. Skulltaker is very well known for showing up and yelling challenges and waiting patiently for his opponent, and literally saluting them in a very duelist fashion before engaging. So Skulltaker would probably wait, but most Khorne characters probably would.
Yeah, and again, individuals have their own stories, and that is to the benefit of Khorne because it adds extra depth. But if we're just looking at stereotypes, they're just going to go.
Charles CK, why isn't he a Demon Prince? I think we answered this pretty well earlier.
I think we have, Charles, and just because you did ask, let's be as blunt as we can be, because for Khorne, Demon Prince is not necessarily the best outcome. Being a mortal who is immortal, constantly at war within the mortal realms rather than the immortal realms, brings as much favor from Khorne as being a demon prince. So if you wish, you could say he's effectively a demon prince in rank, but we're just talking rank here. But in terms of what he is, he absolutely isn't a demon prince. He is, however, Khorne's favored champion, which puts him above many demon princes. Yeah, he's in a different place, but it's not necessarily worse.
Yep. Down Man, one thing I do like about the new map is the new map. For the old world. Why didn't Chaos try and break the Empire when it was split in three? And the answer is because the Norscan dwarfs and Kislev were significantly more powerful back then. Also makes sense of our coolest achievements that much more significant because instead of just failing versus the Empire, he made the Northern Bastions much weaker for later invasions. Yeah,
I agree. One of the great benefits, I think, of the Old World's examination of this era is an ability to show that what Magnus did was significant, and also what Azavar Kul did, the Everchosen, was significant, allowing both of these forces to look like something that was impressive. So, for example, Magnus can be shown to bind the impossible empire back together again. It was broken and fractured and completely incapable of viewing itself as one people's anymore. And on the other side, we've got Azavar Kul, who just came down, crashed against the gates of Kislev and lost. We can now say, yes, but what did that victory entail? And as it turns out, he took out entire empires as he was coming down. And that is cool. So yes, I broadly agree, and I think it's a good development for the game.
Yeah, it's nice that the old world, although they may not be doing it in the army list, which is kind of annoying, but in the actual lore of the setting, we're seeing how things were very, very different before the Great War, which is good. Krimgelto, Arbaal probably got whooped by his ma, so defeated. Well, you know, he had to earn a certain, you have to reach a certain level before wins and losses really start counting. Otherwise, you know, what's the point? Mornington Crescent, from what you've said, if Khorne was ever looking like he'd lose, he's taking Arbaal and going home. No, I don't think Khorne would try to save him.
No, not at all. Khorne just lets the Arbaal go. Anything that looks like Khorne's influence upon Arbaal is nothing more than Arbaal's influence on the battlefield, and Khorne going, oh, hell yeah. Khorne watches as Arbaal doesn't go down to all the blows and goes, how the hell is he still going? Arbaal kicks ass. And if Arbaal failed, Khorne would go, well, fuck yeah. He's not going to say, I'm taking my ball and I'm going to go home, as in, you know, it's my ball, not yours, ha ha ha. He's very much just going to go, well, Arbaal, you're done. Out of here. But that never happens, ever. So it's the great threat, the sword of Damocles that sits over Arbaal's head that never actually comes to pass. So, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and there's a thing sometimes where people will look at, like, one of the dark gods not intervening but becoming involved in a fashion in a fight, or like the champion's wounds are healing, or like the god's gaze or causes effects around the battlefield or whatever, and they go, oh well, like the god's like cheating. But that's just kind of the nature of how chaos operates, is that where the attention of the gods falls, things start to happen, and those that bathe in their favor and their glory benefit from these things happening, whereas those who are their enemies don't. But the same could be said of other gods. There are other gods that will manifest on battlefields, particularly within
what's
fantasy.
Prayer? What's a prayer? I mean, I do a prayer to Sigmar, and suddenly I've got a glowing hammer. That's Sigmar literally going, there you go, have a glowing hammer, going by some versions of the lore. Sigmar making direct. But people don't say, oh, Sigmar saved them, generally speaking. They say he was a great hero who did X, Y, or Z.
Nils, wouldn't Khorne send Arbaal to deal with Grimnir at the third portal? Thanks for the streams. So there is an interesting, so this is actually a good little segue to talk about for a moment, that one of the things that's really interesting about Arbaal is that Arbaal shows up a couple times throughout the timeline. And the big thing about him is that he does not overstay his welcome. And Arbaal isn't stupid. There's a big thing to say there. He's not dumb. Arbaal is not a raging berserker who throws himself at literally everything and an impossible situation where he's not going to win. Could Arbaal defeat Grimnir in a fight? No, I don't think so. But
I'm happy to call that that's a possibility. But I say possibility. I don't say it's a thing that could happen. I think that the reality of it is, it doesn't matter. You're very much thinking about the conflicts of the Warhammer world like they are playing a game of chess. The only one who's playing chess is Tzeentch. And Tzeentch isn't really playing chess. He's playing beyond chess, a truly crazy game. And what you're saying there is, I perceive something that Chaos might want to win, so they would send their bestest champion at it. No, the mortal realms are so much beyond the gods. They don't see it in such simple terms. They send their mortal pawns to go to the world and do what they will. And the great swelling of chaos come one of the Everchosen doing their thing, that Everchosen being an epicenter, a fulcrum point around which all the chaos gods work. That's where a lot of their attention is. They're not worrying about some third gate or some other thing. If Arbaal found his own way there, then sure, but he is in the mortal realms, not the immortal realm of chaos, where everything's completely known by the chaos gods. So I would suggest that this is more of a blind spot than anything else. And it's not that Khorne could never perceive it, it's just, it's in the mortal realms, and it's really hard for the chaos gods to get a direct handle on what that truly is, because they are not mortal. The realm of chaos is alien to us as mortals, and equally the mortal realms are alien to the Chaos Gods, which is why the Chaos Gods constantly look confusing and weird and crazy to anyone that tries to understand them, and anyone who does try to understand them tends to go mad. They're probably chthonic entities, like they come out of some sort of Cthulhu mythos adventure. There's a reason for that. That's one of the founding points of the Chaos Gods when they're first created by Games Workshop, was Call of Cthulhu, well, the Cthulhu-esque aspect of it. So this one, I would suggest, is, yeah, sure, Khorne, if he was even aware enough to do that. Doesn't mean Khorne's an idiot, doesn't mean Khorne doesn't know about the things. It just means that the mortal realms are difficult, exceedingly so. It takes thousands of years for them to truly understand it, and they can only get a bit of a grip when the magic waxes so high that the realm of chaos extends so far they begin to understand a bit more. So the answer to this one, I think, would be no, because that's not really how Khorne or Arbaal work.
Yeah,
and if Arbaal did go, I think it would be a fight.
I agree that I think it would be an interesting fight. I will say that this is a common trap. Like I agree with Andy. Grimnir's kind of a weird case because he's in like a pseudo is in the realm of chaos, isn't at the same time because of where he specifically is. Yeah, and the thing about this that you have to watch out for the gods is, don't think of the gods as, oh, I need to do XYZ so that I can win the great infinite game, because they're playing on a scale and in a timeless sense that they don't make sense, and they're never gonna make sense. And if they ever do make sense, then that's bad writing. They shouldn't make sense. But I do think it is worth taking this opportunity to talk about Arbaal as I do think there's an interesting thing to him of one of the things I find most interesting, that once again, this isn't explored, so it's only something we can wonder about in what form it takes shape, but Arbaal is present at the Battle of Prague. He helps win the Battle of Prague, but then Arbaal vanishes. From all records that we have, Arbaal does not go to the battle at the Gates of Kislev. Or if he did, he fights, and then after as Markul gets surrounded, he fights his way free and runs off. But from everything I've ever seen, it seems to indicate that he just wasn't there at all. Which I think is an interesting question of, would Arbaal not go because either through a tactical sense or through some other sense, he knows what's coming, knows the battle is not going to be a winnable battle, and says, therefore, I shall not be there? Or is it that, and you could just say, well, he was there, but realizes the battle is lost and just fights his way free and goes? Because one of the things that I think a lot of people, this is what I see a lot of people discuss with Arbaal, is how could he possibly be undefeated if he's involved in wars that clearly the bad guys lose in the end? And I think the important thing to really dial in on him is that his don't lose condition is a very personal thing. Yeah. It's not a grand sweeping battle. Yeah, he's not the general. That's the biggest thing. He's not the general. He is a champion. Yeah. And as long as he is winning his fights, that is all that truly matters to him. But agreed. I think there's a potential. Once again, this is not stated anywhere. This is just my personal interpretation. There is a potential for Arbaal to be a really fun, calculating character for a Khorne champion, in the sense of a Khorne champion looking at a battlefield and weighing his odds and making really interesting tactical decisions purely based on his own survival, as opposed to some grand arcing plan or your ever chosen who's, I'm going to win or I'm going to die trying, of having a character, in my opinion, kind of refreshingly, who very much looks at a battle of, I'm going to have my personal victories. I'm going to take on as many of these big bad, because he is a challenger. He does look for the big bad challenges, but there is an implied element of cleverness of not getting himself into a situation over thousands of years that he can't get out of. And I find that very interesting.
I'm happy to take that. I'm also happy to take the opposite, because we have a character who is, as we've discussed, relatively ill-defined. We don't get to sit inside. So the only character trait that we have that is definite is that he has the mark of Khorne, and thus frenzies when he's in combat. He goes wild in combat, but that doesn't speak to outside of combat, or indeed how he deals with anything else. So we could easily have that character in the same way we could easily have someone who almost could be led by the nose through a war and then sent out the other side under some circumstances, because they just kill what's in front of them, and that will lead them in a very different direction than possibly the front gates of a particularly large siege. But because we know some details from the siege, we know that he's a character who thinks, we know that he's a character who responds, and he's a character who leads in the micro scale, if not the macro scale. So we're not dealing with a general, as said, but most certainly when he's at the force of it, he is driving forward and others are coming along with him. So we definitely have someone who's got at least some wherewithal or some direction going behind him. He chose to take down the gates. He chose to slay the thousands there. He chose to move on. It does, however, as Sotek very clearly articulates, leave us with an odd place. What if Chaos loses? How can he be decided to win? And I think that the answer is clear here, and that is, it's in the rules. He's not the general. It doesn't matter if the army loses. All that matters is that he wins. And a perfect example of that, if you play Warhammer, is he just goes forward and every battle he wins. But you might lose the overall battle because they got more points than you, but your character didn't get hurt. You could say, but no, Arbaal's done fine. He just wandered forward, killed anything in his path, but I lost the overall battle. And that is Arbaal in a nutshell. He has never lost any of his toe-to-toe fights. He just hasn't. But he has almost certainly been involved in multiple wars and multiple battles that he has been on the losing side of. But he personally has never lost any of the individual challenges or the fights that he's been confronted with. And it does suggest some form of intellect as to how that expresses. I'm sure we could come up with lots of different answers. Quite like Sotek's one, for example.
I will say he is in my top 5 chaos characters I'm very eager to see in the old world.
Oh, because me too. Just to give some detail.
Yeah, just to add more than a page, because he's a big deal. It's like him, Kolak Suneater making a return, Asvar Kul, and Ingrid Deathsword, or those are really big ones for me.
So I just want to say one last thing on this one, Nils, and that's that the second that Grimnir goes into the gate to hold off against the demons, he has entered immortality. He has entered timelessness, which means the fact that he's now in the gate means he's always in the gate, which means that the fight sort of never ends. It's not possible for us with our very limited view of time and its straight lines that we experience, for us to experience what Grimnir has done. He has effectively put himself as a gigantic block of physicality into the immortal space. And if Arbaal were to walk into that, it would be complicated. I don't think it's as simple as just hitting each other with axes.
Also, it'd be a waste to send him there, considering what he represents. He's such a powerful force in the mortal realm. Sending him after Grimnir would not be a good use of him. This is very funny.
So right.
I asked Angron versus Arbaal, but Angron is 40k warp. Yeah, really Arbaal would probably win because Angron gets his ass kicked a lot.
Yeah, which is a bit unfortunate. And sucks a bit, but I think if Arbaal was written as Arbaal is, Arbaal would probably be on the winning side, but Arbaal would never face off against Angron. That's just not what Arbaal would be there to do. Arbaal is not there to challenge Khorne's other great champions or his great tools. That's not what Arbaal's all about. So I just don't think it would happen, but if it did, then story-wise, Arbaal would probably win. And it's a bit sucky, I think, for Angron.
Poor Angron. Chris Nicholson, revising the wiki as a Wednesday stream when I think no.
Too many tears. Too many sad tears.
The thing that would make it particularly painful and why I don't want to do it is that A, someone could easily just come along and unedit and change the stuff that we edit, and B, it would be a lot of me reading and cross-referencing, which would be very boring for y'all because it'd be a lot of me silently looking at it would be a lot of silently looking at books because I can't read and talk at the same time very effectively. When I read, it takes I can't even listen while I'm reading. I have to just read.
No, I get that. It would be a toughie.
Tyrant, would an angry I can't pronounce that.
Phlebotomist.
Person that draws blood, please Khorne.
Yes.
I would say yes, genuinely.
It depends on the character, obviously, but you often find the Warhammer Fantasy roleplay game toys with ideas like this, i.e. other people who draw blood and cause the blood to flow and then cause it to flow too much in ways that they shouldn't.
I want to say,
and often for bitter, angry reasons, and they do make good foundation points for Khorne cultists.
I want to say it's in the starter set, maybe?
I might have done that.
Yeah, I think there's a surgeon character. I don't know if it's in the starter set, but somewhere.
I think it might actually be in the starter set, because I remember writing it.
There's a surgeon who deliberately. Oh yeah, it is. I'm 100% sure now. Yeah, there is a surgeon in the starter set who is he'll let you you could buy him for really cheap, and he will heal you, but he'll let you bleed more than you should.
He'll bleed you.
He'll bleed you big time.
Yeah.
Final Man, since Arbaal is technically mortal but Mount is a demon, could some sort of anti-demonic thingamajig cause his hound to disappear? No, because of Arbaal's presence, which goes to show how scary Arbaal is.
Arbaal's presence plus the collar of Khorne. There's a collar of Khorne sitting on that hound also, and the collar of Khorne is so deeply anti-magical and in some respects anti-demonic, you could argue, that it grounds the demons into reality in a way that is not normal. But Fleshhounds still dissipate back into the aether at the same rate as other demons, but in this case all the potential anti-demonic stuff that would normally be deployed will be stopped by the collar of Khorne, and all of the normal demonic reasons for him disappearing seems to be stopped by Arbaal. So the ultimate answer is no at all. You are correct
with your last sentence, though, that I know the answer is probably no, but the image is very funny to me. Yeah, it would be great to see his mount just like vanish from underneath him and he just falls to the ground. Poor guy. I think genuinely the only way to banish it is you'd have to kill it. Which if you're in that deep, good fucking luck. Yeah. Mornington Crescent, slightly more serious. He has the Destroyer of Khorne, as in the axe which could destroy Khorne itself. It's one of those you could read either way. So this is a really interesting thing I want to bring up, because Total War actually has a quote about the Destroyer of Khorne that I really fucking love. Which the Destroyer of Khorne, which I will say the Total War version, awesome, so much cooler than the tabletop version.
What's the Total War version? Let's detail that so we have it.
Yeah, so the Total War version does a couple things. Big thing is not only does it essentially increase his weapon skill, it also vastly increases the equivalent of his strength, making it where he ignores a lot of forms of armor, but it gives him two big abilities. One is known as Perfect Vigor, which essentially means he never gets tired. He never gets tired. And the other is what the ability itself does from the weapon, which the Destroyer of Khorne makes it so that the more that he fights, essentially his what in tabletop terms we would think as his weapon skill, his strength, and his charge bonus just goes up and up and up as he kills and kills and kills. He just gets stronger and stronger. But the quote that goes with it, that I love so much, because this could be the thing of how is he grounding these demons, is this: where Arbaal the man ends and the Destroyer, the weapon, begins, is a false question. They both begin with Khorne's immortal wrath, and so neither will ever end. Of that, I love that it implies that he's really not a man. He is an entity. Like, he's so bound to this weapon, to what it represents, that he is more, and maybe in some ways even less, than a man at this point.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and I think it speaks to what demon princedom is for Khorne, and that is that it's more than just simply ascending into the aether. It is ascending into being an epitome of what it is to be Khorne. It is ascending to a position where you are Khorne's wrath made manifest. And that means much more than just simply being in the aether. So I think that gives us another grounding piece of evidence where we could very easily say that demon princedom is for Khorne something quite different than it is for any of the other gods, because Khorne is so much more grounded in the material and less grounded in magic and the immaterial. Khorne is different, and I think Arbaal is a pure expression of that.
Yep. And I think that also ties well into this question of what is the nature of the destroyer? Because that is a thing. Like, he is that is what he is manifest. He is the destroyer. But I think the idea that he almost has an implied destiny or an implied purpose, that he is a destroyer potentially of Khorne itself, I don't think is a completely wrong way of reading it. Of that, there would be aspects of Khorne that would be naturally self-destructive. I mean, think about Scarbrand is literally a shard of Khorne that turns on and backstabs Khorne because of just that little bit of Tzeentchian influence. But Khorne tends to have almost this nature of he's so feral, he's so enraged that he's ultimately self-destructive. And I don't think this would be a poor reading of it, especially of that storyline of Arbaal goes to challenge Khorne himself. There's almost that implied thing of maybe in some twisted way, there is a destiny of his at some point in an impossible future where he is meant to destroy Khorne.
Yeah, I think there is something potentially very cool in that. And all it does is fill me with some sadness that nobody really ran with what this character was offering for the Warhammer world come the end times. Because come the end times, there should have been something useful for Arbaal, not just I'm the one who is kicking in end. Why? Because we have end to deal with and we've got a character that we don't know what to do.
I mean, yeah, in this stream we've proposed two awesome storylines of he goes after Ulrich or he goes after Khorne.
Khorne, yeah. And there's lots of different ways that this could be manifested. Ultimately, what we want for the story of the end times is chaos wins. But as we know, chaos winning is often chaos falling upon itself. They are ultimately going to do that. So as they are winning, having them also ultimately suffer defeats of a host of kinds that people don't expect makes for a perfect end for chaos in some respects. Them destroying the world and themselves almost at once. There would have been something potentially great to follow down there too. But yeah, we didn't get that.
No. Darius Rose, what if the Tutekins had been exiled by Sigmar? Oh, it's a what if episode. How scary would they have been as a chaos tribe? Would they be up there with the tongue? They would have been really fucking scary, to be blunt.
I've got a feeling they always were scary, which is why Ulrich separated them. It was... that was my original intention, because I wrote all the Ulrich material for 2nd edition, where they moved the Tutekins from being just simply a human tribe to being, well, what's the source of them? They were a chaos tribe originally. And my intent then was that Ulrich was separating the worst that the human tribes had to offer to bring them over to his side, for want of a simple description there. And that, yes, it would have been that scary. So that would be a fun what if. What if Ulrich hadn't intervened? What if Ulrich had done what Tal and Raya wanted, which was not to intervene at all? Which ultimately goes back to what if Ulrich had listened to Azurin? Azurin, who, the Elven god side, forbade all the gods for interacting with the mortal realms ever again because of how much they were shaking the world. And Ulrich, for whatever reason, is a god that does not abide to that.
Mm-hmm. Watchdog Doomslayer versus Arbaal. That would be a great fighting game. Let me know when it's made. Tyrant 25. What if I beat Arbaal at ping pong? Once again, you would pick up the ping pong paddle. He would come at you with the axe.
Axe through the table, axe through you as you go, but I've won the game. And he'd go, yep, sure.
Yeah. Remember, Arbaal is not death from fucking Bill and Ted's Adventures. He does not care about your rules of winning the game. He cares about his rules. So
completely.
Yeah, you can challenge him to Smash Brothers or Mario Kart all you want. He's still gonna kill you. Dynaman, Tzeentch is playing Paradox Billiards, Vostroyan, Roulette, 4th Dimensional Hypercube Chess Strip Poker. Yes, against himself more often than not. Dynaman, I had the idea from the person that draws blood comment or something, either in Khorne's realm or ran by a Khorne worship. Tried an abattoir of Khorne where powerful beasts are brought to be slaughtered by draining their blood in Khorne's name. Yep.
So interestingly, I nixed this idea for one of the initial pitches for the Altdorf book. And I nixed that idea because I was looking for the Khornate cults to be directly attached to sentience. And animals, by their very nature, are not. So we took that idea that you offered there, and it got developed into the abattoir were draining far more than just animals. They were draining people, and they were doing bad things to them. And that worked pretty well, taking up, because Altdorf was so large, taking up the many visitors that came to the city that had no routes and no one would miss, and taking them through the slaughterhouses, and going very much a slasher movie with them as they're hunted down by the various butchers that sit inside this abattoir and killed in almost a ritualistic way, which also made for a fun adventure hook when your PCs get dropped into the middle of this abattoir from hell. Many horror movies, rather amusingly, picked up that trope afterwards. There's one about a haunted house, for example, that did that a little bit after, released 2 years after we went with that plan. But that plan never got made because I left the job. But that was one of the examples of it. But we went beyond simply just an abattoir killing animals, which ultimately doesn't bring Khorne and is not attached to rage, and instead turned it into some very angry butchers inside this particular avatar who had their own problems that they were manifesting by murdering outsiders. It was eventually dropped down onto a rather sad tale of nationalism and how nationalists deserve to have a little bit more thought about what they think about outsiders.
Mm-hmm.
They are the bad guys in this case.
Yeah, so I think that has
we caught
up on that. Yeah, so
we head into the realm of chaos.
Yes, it's time to that is our last stopping point for today's stream. So Arbaal, it's 800 years before Sigmar, for whatever it was he was fighting, whether it was elves, Cathayans, his fellow chaos tribes, who knows what. He reaches a point where he has decided that there is no challenge worthy of his attention that he is aware of, that he can get access to easily in the mortal realms. So he decides to head north. Or if you want to go with a really crazy alternate timeline that is unlikely but certainly possible, south. And he enters into the realm of chaos. This, to be clear, because this can be a little confusing for a lot of people, is pretty rare for chaos champions. Going into the realm of chaos itself is not something you do casually. It is something that is very, very fucking terrifying because it's basically walking into hell, except for often our descriptions of hell make hell obey laws that we understand, as far as like the way that time and physics and moving in a linear direction will take me in the direction that I think it's going to take me. You know, in good old Dante's version, which is very, very famous, you can walk through hell with a guide and it's not that bad. As long as you're careful to stay next to him. You'll see some spooky stuff, sure, but like you'll get where you're going and it doesn't break the laws of your brain. Whereas the Warhammer Fantasy Realm of Chaos is the very Cthulhu-esque, Lovecraftian version of hell, where nothing makes sense. There is no way through unless the gods favor you enough that the mere moments they focus on you for a split second, you are taken somewhere that you want to be. But for the most part, it is a mad wandering realm that makes no goddamn sense.
Yeah. I think that this is very clear and is worth reiterating so that we can loosely understand both what Arbaal did, what Arbaal survived, and what Arbaal thus is. Arbaal is a character that we know will ground demons into reality around him and mean that they do not need to vanish. But we can be pretty certain the opposite is also the case. Because Arbaal, having wandered the world for however long it was, and it could be anything from a few decades to potentially scores of years or even centuries, he could have been around since the Cataclysm for all we know. He has been kicking around for a very long time, has eventually come to the conclusion that there is nothing left that will form a challenge to him. So he decides, in his, some would suggest, insanity, to ride off into the realms of chaos to challenge Khorne himself. Now, if you enter the realm of chaos as a physical entity, not as a spirit or a demon or some equivalent, you're not going to survive normally. It requires some sort of bubble of reality around you to survive. We have several examples of this in Warhammer's long history. I'll give you a simple example. Malekith. He is spirited away from the Battle of Finuval Plain, where Teclis beats him in a magical duel, and he enters directly into the realm of chaos and comes out a very different entity at the other side of that, having witnessed the realms of chaos. But he's in a bubble of magic of his own creation to survive this. He basically played in the old Winds of Magic expansions the escape card, and the escape card allows you to leave into the realm of chaos and pop out elsewhere, having experienced the horrific realm on the other side, but protected by a realm of reality and a bubble of magic. You survive to fight another day. This isn't what he did. He has no magic. He has no ability to extend a wall of reality around him using magic. He walks into the realm of chaos. Now, the first question is how? Because you can't. Unless you are literally entering, say, a chaos gate or a rift in reality, there's no easy way to do this. But we do know that Arbaal has one significant advantage. He has a demon that he rides, and this demon comes from there. And I think this is probably the answer. This demon goes home with him riding upon it. The next question, though, is how does he survive? And the answer lies in what he does in the mortal realms. In the mortal realms, demons do not collapse into instability around him. And I would suggest that such is his will, that the opposite is also the case when we're in the Aether, which means that the Aether does not collapse him. The great warping energies of the Aether do nothing to him. He grounds reality into truth around him, allowing him to march directly into the realm of chaos and experience it in a fashion that would normally be left to dreams. Outside entities being loosely aware of the shifting tides that is the realm of chaos, with its great planes and its forges and its horrors that are understood by mortal minds in rather two-dimensional ways rather than the great depths that they are, but they get dreams of what lies beyond. Arbaal witnessed them with his eyes, walking the plains of blood, facing off against untold demons, arriving in other worlds, and he disappears some 900 years before Sigmar's even born. And he doesn't lose himself. So we know that he can survive. It's not because Khorne goes, you're my favourite one. Khorne doesn't care, really. Khorne's watching on with a certain amount of interest because Arbaal is so great. And Arbaal doesn't die. Arbaal doesn't lose himself. He doesn't get turned into a demon. He doesn't get warped into something else. He doesn't sit there becoming an eternal entity that is locked in an eternal war within the realm of chaos because it has become an unthinking demon that is nothing more than a part of Khorne. No, he maintains his individuality. He maintains who he is as he marches through the realm of chaos. He is abjectly not a demon. He is not someone who has ascended. He is someone who has chosen to enter the realm of chaos to challenge the ascended, to show that the ascended are not all that. And indeed, he succeeds.
Yeah,
now,
so one thing I want to say to just kind of dial in is that it is very likely, because of this grounding of reality around him, that he has a much more linear route through the realm of chaos than you would normally expect. And getting to Khorne is a bitch because Khorne has the largest of the domains of the four powers. Yep. And if you go watch our Brass Citadel stream, we talk about a lot of the things around it, where you have to go through the fields of blood, where there's like trees that bleed and people being ripped open to feed these fields that are growing this weird type of plant. You have to fight through the Bastion Stair, which is literally a giant fortress that connects two entire chunks of the realm of chaos. This horrifying fortress full of demons, lost mortals, and things that don't have a description. Arbaal has to fight his way through this. He has to get to the plains outside of the Brass Citadel, which is the realm known as the Endless Battle, where there are armies of demons and mortals who are trapped that are just fighting for eternity. And there is no end. It's literally an endless war where all they do is spill blood for eternity. And whether or not you even truly can die there is a big fucking question mark. It could be you get sliced open, you suffer horrible agony and pain, you die, and then 5 seconds later, as far as you're aware, the battle has started over. You're just there forever. Arbaal fights his way through this, and the thing is these are not only just regular contests, these are contests in very metaphysical ways as well. These are contests, some of them are traps, some of them are lures to try and lure him in with a battle that never ends. What a glorious gift for a Khorne champion to fight never-ending enemies. He resists that temptation to work your way through the defenses of the Bastion Stair and not get obsessed with trying to claim one of the greatest fortresses of Khorne. Resist that temptation. He pushes through something. It's not just I have to win a beat 'em up in a classic like 2D sprite Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles working my way across the screen. He is genuinely resisting what would be to him actual temptations to just stay forever and indulge. Mm-hmm. Which once again shows his will.
And it also shows that he's not a demon. Yeah. Because demons ultimately are expressions of pure emotion. They are expressions of absolute fulfillment of one aspect of being Khorne, which means that he never becomes part of Khorne. The demons, all the demons of Khorne, are effectively just extensions of Khorne. They are bits of Khorne, all wrapped in the great vortex of what that god is. But he walks through all of that storm, underneath his storm shield, so to speak, or a Geller field if we're in 40k. He effectively is pushing against it. Now, that might not just be his will, although I would suggest it probably is, given the nature of his character. That could be an expression of how his Chaos Armor works, because it's originally founded there. His Chaos Armor, well, there we go, Warhammer Fantasy Gellerfield. Nice one, Dynamite. It's brilliant. It is possibly an expression of the fact that he's the destroyer of Khorne. There's lots of potential answers to how this came to pass, but I think at its heart, because we're now in a metaphysical realm, we're in a realm that goes beyond simply the mortal rules. It is all about who he is as a man, and who he is as a man is pure determination to hit the goal that he's heading towards, and nothing will stop him. And that grants him his Geller field, so to speak, his inability for the realms of chaos to tear him apart or to absorb him, to leave him towards an eternal battle in the realm of battle that never comes to an end, bloodshed that does not halt. He goes through it. And while the fight continues behind, he has the will to pull himself out of that at the other side, axe in hand, ready to move on to the next challenge. And we're pretty certain he gets to the feet of Khorne's throne. And there are, how many mortals have fought their way there? Probably none.
Before we go over this last part, I'm going to take a quick super chat break.
Yay, super chat break!
And then we're going to get into what happened there.
What happened?
Psych! 2416256. Thank you very much for the 6 months of a tier 2 sub to the Lawhammer Twitch channel.
Much.
That's very generous. Thank you very much. Dino-Man, hell is just a word. Reality is much, much worse from Event Horizon. Yeah, everyone's favorite Warhammer 40k prequel movie.
Yeah, Event Horizon is great. If you haven't watched Event Horizon, just remember that the author himself has said that in his headcanon, it is the prequel to 40k. That was the writer, the script writer for the movie. As far as they were concerned, yeah, this is the prequel to 40k.
Donovan, I know this is likely unknown / up to interpretation, but in your view, do the gods truly watch champions, demons, etc., or is it more that they're an amalgamation of aspects of reality that are attracted to people with certain emotions / perform certain actions?
For all that second part certainly sounds vague. It is more the second part than it is the first. In that, if you are a god of pure rage, anywhere that there is rage, you are inhabiting. So the champions of chaos, who are effectively mirroring everything that their god likes, that in some respects means that their god is by default sort of there. And it's not so much that the god is actively looking for those things, it is those things. And when we're in the warp, which is connected to all stuff, when we're over there in the aether, in the realm of chaos. Everything that is that individual emotion is manifest within the almost anthropomorphized god, Khorne, for example, in his rage, and often impotent rage, regarding the world that's out there and the conflict, the bloodshed, and everything else that it represents. When it happens over in the mortal plane, the god simply is there. And sometimes that means people who are absolutely unaware of the chaos gods, they've got no knowledge of it at all, but if they act in a way that brings those chaos gods, sometimes the word Khorne will come to their lips. And that's not because the god is watching per se, but the god absolutely is, because the chaos gods are intrinsically linked into everything that the material realm is and are desperately trying to get in there.
Yeah, one of the things is that a lot of the descriptions and points of view we get of Warhammer characters, they're often anthropomorphizing the chaos gods. They're trying to look at them and understand them in a frame that they can. And in a very like meta, like trying to genuinely understand the chaos god sense, that isn't how the chaos gods would work. Now, because of the nature of the way the writing works, that is how they work, especially because there are some writers that look at that and take it at face value. So there have been times where we get writers that show the chaos gods acting in a way that would give you the idea that, oh no, they're physically looking at someone. And like deliberately choosing to look at them and then deliberately acting. But I would say that is a misinterpretation of how they would function.
Indeed. But it is also worth adding that many of the demons are far closer to anthropomorphized versions of what they are, what the gods represent, particularly when they're brought into reality, where they begin to pick up character, especially those that have managed to manifest within the mortal realm for some time. So the answer is, to your initial question, sort of yes to everything.
Yeah. Tyrant 25, which chaos god would each of you be most likely to fall to?
Easy.
I would fall to Nurgle so fast it's not even
Okay,
funny.
so this one's easy for me. I don't get angry. I might appear angry on the outside, but I don't get angry ever. So rage is actually quite alien to me. So let's move over to despair. I'm too optimistic. Even when I'm in the darkest places, everyone gets depression, but I just don't give in to despair. I'm always thinking, tomorrow will be fine. It's going to be great. So I'm not going to give in to that one either. Then we get into change. No, I'm happy with my lot, and generally wouldn't be changing anything. I'm not one of those people who looks back on the past and goes, I wish I'd done this differently. Of course, we can do that as a mental exercise, but I wouldn't change anything. I'm very happy with my life, which then leads to my absolute lack of impulse control, meaning that excess by default would sadly be where I would fall. I have no impulse control. I start on something that I know I shouldn't be eating. I will continue to eat that until it's done. And I just sit there and I'm like, I'm so full now. I should have stopped approximately 50 bites ago. I am someone who clearly needs a Zempic. I am someone who requires a drug to stop me from doing these things. Slanesh would be my weak point.
Yeah, for me, I think between the anxieties that I take pills for to keep my brain chemistry in like a good balance and things like that, and I have a profound fear of a lot of things, and Nurgle is a god that preys very heavily on fear. Like if you're someone where like you're really afraid of getting sick, or you're really afraid of getting infirm, or aging, or dying, or any of those things, Nurgle is a sinister motherfucker. And that would get me real bad.
I just want to bring this one up because elemental exposure, you're right, it does seem like a shock, but it's more that Nurgle wants me because I'm apparently immune to
It's a very
Nurgles.
One-sided relationship.
It's a one-sided relationship. Sadly, Slanesh appears to have claimed my soul because, yes, with ADHD does make me pray to Slanesh, even though I don't want to. Damn straight, Cody.
Donman asks him if Arbaal is unable to actually fight Khorne because he's not a defined entity he can actually fight, so he thinks it'll be the monstrous god on the throne, but he sees what Khorne actually is, and it's way less definable than that. So that's actually an interesting question that I think will tie us into what was going to be the last topic, is going to be what happened when Arbaal made it to Khorne.
I have an answer for this. I'm interested to see what your one is.
Yeah, so what I will start by saying is, based on the conversation we were having earlier, I think it would genuinely be a very bizarre fucking scenario, because the Chaos Gods, one of the things that the lore is good about is it always talks about how they appear to certain individuals to show up as a myriad of forms. Whether, Khorne is often depicted as a great armored individual with the head of a terrifying hound-like creature that is constantly roaring in rage and throwing skulls from his throne when he's not off rampaging off somewhere. When Arbaal encounters him, I think there are two possibilities from off the top of my head that could realistically happen. The first would be that when he gets in there, he sees his interpretation of Khorne, that his grounding of the realm of chaos coming up against the force that is a god causes a portion, maybe like the tiniest of fractions, which would still be beyond ginormous, of Khorne to manifest in a way that Arbaal can comprehend and understand, and they fight. And Arbaal wins, in a sense, perhaps even destroying a small piece of Khorne and claiming a victory in a sense. The other is that when he makes it to Khorne, he encounters something truly impossible to comprehend. Something so beyond him that he goes in the room, he walks out 1,000 years later, and he has won because he is still him.
I have a different answer. That's interesting.
I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Okay, so I'm going to go down a very different route because we are aware that the Aether is a place of concept. It is a place that the gods themselves are the vast summation of a particular expression of being. And thanks for that one, Stratton. It's not unfair. It's really not unfair. So, what is Arbaal if Arbaal has defeated everything that Khorne's realm has to offer and fought through every last part of that realm, has sat on the plains of battles, have gone through the fields of blood, have ascended every stair that can be ascended, have basically made a raid on Khorne's heart and the great citadel there, and arrived in the middle. And I tell you who Arbaal is. Arbaal is Khorne's champion, i.e. Arbaal is Khorne. Who does Arbaal see when he gets to the center? He sees himself. He sees that he has become everything that is the manifestation of Khorne. All of the frustrations of Khorne, all of the successes and the weaknesses, because you can't be Khorne without fighting all your way to there. You can't, be anything other than Khorne without reaching that point. He's effectively ascended. And he hasn't become Khorne. No, quite the opposite. He has become everything that Khorne is. And he cares not from whence the blood flows. There is no one to defeat. He has already defeated everything. And he returns to the mortal realm. So the fight is one great path towards the ultimate ascension. He is, as I would suggest earlier, he's beyond the core concept of a demon prince. The demon princes are fixed and locked into those eternal battles inside the realm of chaos. They are the fixed entities. They are demons that can't go beyond what they are. Arbaal can. Just as Khorne has a greater will that lies beyond, so does Arbaal. And Arbaal comes out of the realm of chaos realizing that the great Khorne, the great blood god, is nothing more than doing what he's doing. Fighting like he's fighting. Never ever losing. And if he does, he loses himself completely. And becoming spawn is nothing more than becoming at one with the great Aether that lies beyond. And that, I feel, is a far more likely end for his great quest. It's not the quest and the goal, so to speak. It's the journey upon getting there. And the realization that you have become as of the god.
I actually really love that, though, because that ties a really fun parallel to the story of Sigvald and Slaanesh, which is perfect because of the whole Khorne versus Slaanesh thing, where Sigvald also makes a journey north and makes it to Slaanesh, and Sigvald only sees himself. And which it's different because the reason Sigvald sees it is it's a different situation, but there's a fascinating parallel that would exist in those stories that I really, really like.
Make for a good fight after Sigvald versus Arbaal.
Yeah, that would have. Oh man, instead of Sigvald versus Crow was cool, but Sigvald versus Arbaal, which we almost got, that would have been fucking oof. Hagen, yeah. Oh man, if they had done that and actually used that as Arbaal saw himself and Sigvald saw himself, so you almost it's a mortal version of just Slaanesh versus Khorne as the world's ending around them and the gods start falling out on each other.
The pieces. Yeah.
while Archaon's trying to hold everything together. That would have been so good. That would have been so good. Hagen, thank you. No message, but thank you very much for the super chat. We appreciate it. Jack Ruby, in Age of Sigmar, there's a bloodthirster that builds a city and becomes a free market capitalist and sees it as a tribute to Khorne. You're right, Sotek. AOS fleshes out the gods. Shit gets weird in AOS, but it's part of the fun. I don't recall this story at the top of my head, but this wouldn't shock me that much. I'll put it that way. Bloodthirster doing something insane with a city like that. Elemental Exposure, need to bring back the whole Who Would Win series. So I score off against Nurgle for Andy's soul. Oh boy.
Yeah, that would be a thing.
Can Andy indulge enough to ward off Nurgle's run?
Hilarious.
Tyrant 25. So Arbaal is a liar, and his real title should be Arbaal the Undefeated at specifically combat. Well, it wouldn't just be hand-to-hand combat, it would just be combat. Though, I mean, you have to remember that Khorne, it's not that it's once again, Bill and Ted's Adventures, the term undefeated, it would be Khorne as a god has a very strict definition of what it is to win, what victory implies. Obviously, if you walk up and say, I invented a game where the first one to say first wins first, and you're like, haha, you have to turn into a spawn now. Obviously, that just doesn't work for the character. There are certain definitions and things. Now, that being said, I do think something that would be genuinely interesting, if you were being a little more serious about it, would be the idea of there being like a Tzeentchian champion that does try and find ways to see if he can test the limits of what it is to be truly undefeated with a character of Arbaal, and that being a little saga that he goes through of being challenged in very bizarre, unusual ways of the Tzeentch champion trying to see if he can either prod at his ego or prod at what he fundamentally is, but then ends up being like unmade by it.
Because ultimately it is has Arbaal lost, and it's Arbaal's decision. And being crushed in combat is most obvious, but if Arbaal was to lose fundamentally and thus move himself from the position of Khorne never loses. The second he does that, he's no longer tied to Khorne the way he was, and he spawns out.
Yeah, a good way to put this is you'll note that when it talks about Arbaal's thing, it's not if he loses, like Andy said, it's not that if he loses the battle. It always very specifically says if Arbaal loses his resolve. If his resolve breaks, because as long as he's alive, the fight's still on.
Yep.
So if he's fighting a duel and he's getting his ass handed to him, like he's fighting, I don't know, Kraken Rock the Black, and Kraken Rock's just wailing on him, as long as he is still breathing, the fight is still going unless he gives up.
Yeah, in many respects, it's why the concept of defeat really only applies to the battle game. It's why the rule really only applies there, because in reality, it never happens. In the Warhammer world, Arbaal never goes spawn. It just doesn't happen because it's impossible to defeat Khorne, because Khorne is eternal. His rage is never ending. There is no seeing it come to an end. So yeah, it's an interesting rule, and I think it would make a really good story pitching Tzeentch versus Khorne, for example. Pitching this character who's attempting to break the resolve of Arbaal. It's not just trying to beat him up in close combat, it's trying to break Arbaal's faith, basically. Who Arbaal is, because he's so much Khorne.
Yeah, that would be the thing, is if you wanted to genuinely defeat Arbaal and make him the defeated, you would have to convince him that he has lost.
Yep.
That would be the trick, which would basically be impossible, but that would make a fucking kick-ass story. A short story. It really would. Like, that would make a great short story.
It would. I reckon you could even turn that into potentially a novel, speaking to the eternal war that Arbaal has had over multiple battlefields, and one orchestrating demon or champion of Tzeentch or whatever behind the scenes trying to break him in different ways at each battlefield, and each one ultimately Arbaal pulling through.
Yep. Donovan, Andy was the advisor in that Warhammer 3 Slaanesh and when the advisor meets with Slaanesh and Nurgle. Oh man.
Oh, that was a good trailer though. Enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's the car he's trying to get his book. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Magladroth, wait, if Arbaal is the entity that becomes Khorne, i.e. Khorne was once mortal, then became a god like Sigmar, Arbaal has met his future self. I mean,
and this one, Magladroth, I would say no. In that, Khorne is not Arbaal. That isn't what I was saying. What I was saying was that Arbaal has done everything that is Khorne and sees that there is nothing to defeat. He already is everything that Khorne is. That doesn't mean he is Khorne made manifest. He's not a god. What he is everything that Khorne is. There's nothing to war against except for everything else and making the blood flow. He is a perfect examination of what it is to be Khorne. So there is nothing else to fight. He has reached the center. The greater demons are nothing more than his pawns and playthings, in the same way that, yeah, it's more complicated than simply saying X is Y.
Yeah, because you have to remember that just like when Sigvald saw Slaanesh as himself, it's not actually him. It is that he is witnessing everything that the god is and sees that he is a representation. He is a genuine, deep personification of what the god represents, but he isn't the god.
Because ultimately, that's what all the champions are trying to do. All the champions are emulating their particular god, so that their god will say, well, it's not even that the god does it. They become so close to the god that they effectively become a perfect example of that god and a demon. So they rise up and become an unchanging version of that segment of what it is to be that god. They are a perfect representation of it by their deeds. And Arbaal is the ultimate expression of self-determination that lies at a lot of the Khorne worship. And that is when he reaches there, he never reaches the point of ascension in eternity because he's too bloody minded. He's too strong-willed. He can never become that. So he'll never become just a part of one aspect of what it is to be Khorne. He'll never become an ascended creature if we go by that version. Instead, he then returns to the mortal realms because he's too bloody minded to become an ascended entity. Because he can't, because he's too close to Khorne. So that's why Khorne hates magic. Because at its heart, there's a part of Khorne that is not this certainty of the uncertainty that magic brings. It's deeply philosophical and weird, is the core way of putting it. It would take a nice bit of writing to fully manifest that in a way that sounded like it was worthwhile.
Yep. By the way, go check out our Brass Citadel stream where we tackle a lot of Khorne's weirdness and actually came up with some really fun theories. Psych, Lord of Change, loser, worships Khorne. Yeah, essentially. So there are a couple of interesting little comments here that I want to pull up as well. So Strick saying, what about if we what if you tied this into the story that y'all mentioned, the Brass Citadel stream of Khorne waiting in his fortress for something, perhaps being afraid of something eventually working its way to him? That is an angle you could take with it. So like if you go with the angle some other people mentioned earlier of what if he is literally the destroyer of Khorne, that could be one angle that you take with that story.
Certainly could be. There's lots of other tales that could be told with this. Indeed, there's lots of just tales that could be told with this. Sadly, though, what we have instead is hints and tiny little drips of what could be told, and then none of those hints or drips or little potentials are used, and we're left with just, he's a Khornate champion, he kills End, he gets killed by an elf, the end.
General Dragon LP says Roman in the past was kind of like Arbaal. The victor is not victorious if the vanquished does not consider himself to be vanquished.
Yeah, there's particularly when you move over towards the classics in general, there's a great deal of philosophy underpinning much of their tales and the way that they project their histories. And I would suggest that there is a deep philosophical way that we could look at what Arbaal has done and what he represents in terms of Khorne and the nature of gods in general. And I think Arbaal could be a fun examination for that.
Grizz says, what if Arbaal were to fight someone with the Widowmaker or a weapon of similar power in like a very blunt set? So I'll put it this way. If your question is, what would happen if Arbaal fights someone that could kill him? The answer would be he gets killed.
Could die.
Yeah. But rather amusingly, he would not, I don't think he would genuinely consider himself defeated. He just ceases to be. I genuinely do not think, realistically looking at the character, I do not think it is possible for there to be a Arbaal the defeated. He is Arbaal the undefeated until he ceases.
Yeah, but I would add one caveat, because I agree completely. And that caveat is that we could have a story where Arbaal is convinced that he has lost. And I think that story is hinted at the very rule that he gets turned to spawn. That is the outcome that should never occur. And the reason I suggest that could occur is because he's not a demon. Demons are very much, demon princes are very much an epitome of one way of living that very much is a part of the overall god. He is immortal, which means ultimately he can change. Ultimately, he can be led down a different path, and he is susceptible to change. Susceptible in some respects to the great enemy that is Tzeentch. And so far, he is yet to capitulate, yet to ever bend, yet to ever become that. But he is not pure intent in terms of a demon, which means demons pretty much can't change. He can, which means that there's always that potential. And I think the rule nicely sums that up. The potential is there. He is the tipping point where you could go that way and he could admit defeat sometime, but that's never occurred yet. And in terms of the world as we have, it never has. But I quite like the idea that there is that constant idea that he could, and it's because he's mortal that he has that option.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to amend my statement of that is, I think that would be, if the goal for the end times is you're going to get rid of Arbaal and not bring him forward at that point, I think that is the way Arbaal has to go down.
Yeah.
Is that something convinces him he's been defeated and he spawns.
And I think you've really got one of two choices for doing that. You either go with the classic one or the other, Slaanesh and Khorne, as was presented in the original Realms of Chaos books, and we have some Slaanesh change wrought upon him, or we go with Tzeentch, magic, changing his mind in some fashion. Personally, though, I would probably go with Slaanesh because of its longer history as being opposed to Khorne. And I would look to have Slaanesh be the one that basically seduces Arbaal away from Arbaal's current thoughts. So that doesn't necessarily mean any physical seduction. That's more the metaphorical seduction of moving Arbaal to a thought process where he goes, I've lost. And through doing so, that's it. He's spawned. He's gone. He's no longer what he was. And Slaanesh wins that day. I think I agree, broadly speaking, we'd be looking for a method of, for the end times in particular, changing him.
Yeah, that would actually be really interesting, especially if you were to go, if someone were to explore what if we had replaced Krell in the fight against Sigvald with Arbaal and have it where Sigvald is actually able to get Arbaal to admit defeat, humiliate him enough where he's able to get him to admit defeat and genuinely collapse. But you still keep the storyline of Sigvald in the process gets dealt a wound that cannot heal. He gets marred, scarred physically, and it drives Sigvald completely fucking insane because his beauty has been marred. There's a good story there.
Yeah, I think there's a good story in general there, which is that the four chaos powers should be their own undoing at the end of the world, and that the great victory that they should have should be undermined by their own inability to stick to their various allegiances that they created through Archaon.
That would have been the best way, I think, to set up Age of Sigmar, which they didn't do, which sucks, is that it should have been Chaos had genuine ultimate victory, and then they start fucking with each other, and it slips just enough out of Archaon's grasp that Sigmar and the things that go on to be Age of Sigmar escape.
Yeah,
and
agreed.
That is the kickoff point of Age of Sigmar.
And because Archaon's focus is upon the end, is upon his success, what will bring about his victory, his own focus being lying there means that those who are around him are almost freed from their various promises or their gods saying that they will do this and revert to type. Because the more magic there is in the world, the more we're going to be dealing with demons who refuse to be anything other than what they are.
Man, that would work. That would work so well, because that would actually have been such a better way to use Archaon's obsession with Sigmar. Would have been that at the very end he gets too focused on I have to break these Sigmarites instead of focusing on what he should have been, which was holding chaos together
for the end.
Well, I didn't expect
a whole ton of things to unfold that means everything escapes and it all slips through Archaon's fingers, meaning that yes, the Warhammer world may have been destroyed, but that which makes the Warhammer world, its component parts, its species, its factions, they all survive through one fashion or another, whether it's alternate realms, gods, fractions of realm spheres or whatever that may have already existed and always existed, being populated by things that Archaon just could not get his hands on because of his obsession with what lay directly in front of him and his blindness to chaos falling apart all around. Yeah, that'd be
That would
fun.
have been such a cooler final panel. Would have been like Archaon flailing in just absolute incoherent rage as like
the
things
twin-tailed
bleed
comet
away
gets
from him.
away.
Yeah, like of him, like that would have been such
Yeah.
a fucking cool last panel. Would have been Archaon losing his shit because he wins, but not the victory he wanted.
Yeah. Ultimately, that's so Warhammer to its very core, and that is that yes, Chaos is always going to win, but Chaos is also always going to lose because of the nature of what it is. No matter what victory you have, it's undermined.
I wasn't expecting to get what I think would have genuinely been the perfect way to end off the end times out of Arbaal, but hey, here we are.
No, neither would I. So I would like to do a quick conclusion because I think we're pretty much at the end now.
Yes, we are past time.
I wasn't sure whether there would be enough with Arbaal. It was brought up last week. Do we have enough material here? Because we literally only have. Yeah. We literally only have like a few paragraphs and some rules. That's it. And there's a mention here and a mention there, and a brief Arbaal's doing stuff at end, and oh, his armor, it's forged over here, but very little beyond that. But as is often the case, not just with Lorebeards, but with characters who clearly have very clear special rules, we end up having to draw conclusions from them. And in this case, we have drawn some pretty interesting conclusions. Number one is that Arbaal, for all he is not a demon prince, is arguably of equal rank, or at least most certainly standing beside them as far as Khorne is concerned. He is an entity of much more interest to Khorne than many of its lesser demon princes that it may have. Indeed, demon princes are almost two a penny in comparison to this undefeated entity that has fought through the realms of chaos and the mortal realms and never lost. We have a character who is extraordinarily fascinating, who can somehow keep demons in the material realm, who can somehow enter the immaterial realm and not lose himself. So a creature of pure will. Arbaal the Undefeated is undefeated because he simply refuses to ever stop. Now, if I was to take that and actually epitomize that in terms of the Warhammer rules, it would suggest to me, somewhat unexpectedly, that Arbaal the Undefeated may actually be a dwarf. And I know that will immediately make you go, what the fuck are you ending on that?
That is exactly what the face I just made.
Okay, and I think it's fair, but he is the absolute expression of stubbornness. And that is often laid at the feet of dwarfs. But I'm not going to say he is one, because I don't believe that. Nor will I ever. If anyone tries to put that on me, I'll say, yeah, fuck off. Because humanity always reaches the extremes. It always takes whatever everyone else does and goes too far with it. And in some respects, that's exactly what Arbaal is. He is an expression of what would happen if the dwarves went completely wrong. And that, I think, is fascinating in and of itself, because it speaks to what would happen if dwarves do fall to chaos in different ways. But Arbaal, being human, goes far further. We've also tied Arbaal into the entire story of the Empire. We have concluded that we think he would probably be better as a Teutogan, the foundation tribe of modern Middenheimers who are now attached to the god Ulrich. And Ulrich and Khorne have always had relatively close associations for many. Indeed, many on the outside often go, well, Ulrich just is Khorne, isn't he? While us writers in the background are desperately tapping away going, no, he really isn't. Stop, please. But that doesn't stop the theories. And in this particular instance, we end up with a beautiful story that ties Arbaal into the Empire, that ties Arbaal into Ulrich, that ties Ulrich into Khorne, that ties Arbaal into why demon princes are not necessarily as important for Khorne. We get all sorts of answers for this. It, in some respects, speaks to Valkia and why she hasn't become a demon prince and why actually she has. There is a reason it's confused, because demon princedom for Khorne is something that's a bit different. Reaching that prime position doesn't mean you have to become an etheric entity. Although Valkia kind of has. She sort of skirts the line between. Arbaal hasn't, but is nevertheless just as important to Khorne for all of the material excess that he brings, to use a very Slaneshi term. So ultimately, the story of Arbaal for us is a story of who Khorne is. How does it work? And his perfect life, as in, as far as Khorne's concerned, he has been the epitome of everything that it is to be a Khornate champion, speaks to Khorne himself. And the fact that Arbaal could survive the Realm of Chaos, could come out the other side, and could pretty much single-handedly bring down Prague and more beyond. For me, Arbaal, much like some of the other characters we've discussed, is the great unexplored character of Warhammer, a character that hints at so much, but very, very much, when you actually see how they concluded it in the end times, got wasted.
Yep. And I'm going to add two things that are mostly unrelated, but I think should be said. Number one, because of Andy's fucking Arbaal could have been a dwarf comment, I would love to see, if anyone's ever bored, if anyone ever wants to make a thread of Lorebeards quotes taken out of context, I'd love to see that. Second,
Arbaal is a dwarf!
Second of all, I am pretty convinced, based on decisions that I've seen being made in recent ages, that there's someone at GW that watches Lorebeards, and if they do, please make Arbaal a really important character in the old world. Use any of these ideas.
Please.
We would really love it. One guy, so I have to ask, will he be balling? He's always balling. He's always balling.
Arballing.
Arbaal. Jesus. So anyway, that is going to be it for us today. A couple of last minute notes that this Wednesday is going to be really interesting. We're going to be putting out like the images and stuff here. We're going to be doing something a little different this Wednesday, which is we're going to have a special guest. So this Wednesday on Lorebeards is going to be here on the Lawhammer channel. We're going to have the one and only Pancreas No Work, who is a YouTube creator that is very, very, very big, and is a major force within the Warhammer sphere online. And we're going to be talking to him quite a bit about the best way that I can explain it right now. It'll make more sense in the stream itself. Is we're going to be talking a lot about how Warhammer has evolved for people getting into the hobby. What it was like getting into the Warhammer back in the 80s versus what it was like for someone in the you'll never guess who. Versus getting into Warhammer in the late 90s, early 2000s, in my case, and getting into Warhammer in more modern eras and the different forms that's take, and how in many ways, especially with the age of the internet, how Warhammer Fantasy is evolving through the sense of, in a very genuine sense, in the form of memes, in the form of new content, and how much it has changed. Like, probably, like a good example that I'll just throw out here that I'm definitely going to bring up in the stream is like how someone like Balthazar Gelt has evolved from being a fairly minor background character that not a lot of people really cared about to being one of the most famous characters in the entirety of the Empire, because of a fucking Vietnam meme that got really, really popular because it was genuinely very funny of the welcome to Astalia, gentlemen speech. So we're going to get into a lot of really, really interesting things. I think it's genuinely going to be a very, very interesting episode. So it's going to be a little less, well, no, probably a good bit. A lot of lore is going to come up, but it's going to be mostly about, I think, how people consume Warhammer Fantasy in different ways. And I think there's going to be a really interesting discussion to be had there.
Yeah, that's going to be super fun. I'm really looking forward to that one.
Yeah, so we'll be having him with us next week, which is going to be, or no, this Wednesday, not next week. This Wednesday, which is going to be a really good time. And then usual time. And then on Friday,
no, I'm going to do it next Sunday.
Okay. Yeah, so also next Sunday, I mean, don't miss Lawhammer on Friday. They're finally going to be back this week. Don't miss it. After extended holiday break. So on Sunday, it starts my birthday week. So we're going to be celebrating Loremaster of Sotek birthday stuff that following Sunday, starting with Morgar the Shadowgave.
About time.
Yeah, about time. I tried to have him win 2 polls and he lost both times. So I said, fuck it, I'm rigging the vote.
He's coming in hard.
Yeah, so
God killer.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about the God Devourer who ate a bunch of gods that we don't know.
Because they were eaten.
Yeah,
that'll be fun.
Yeah, so I am genuinely super excited for that one.
And over on the Lawhammer side, for the next 2 Tuesdays, we're going to have an unexpected stream because one of our players, bless her soul, has forgotten just what we were doing all those months or so ago. So she's going to be doing a live watch of the last 2 episodes of the show on 2 Tuesdays. So this coming Tuesday and the Tuesday after.
That
so
is
that's
genuinely so fun.
Is going to be doing a live watch with anyone who wants to turn up. She's going to be doing that over on the Lawhammer Discord, where the chat will be. If you wish to watch it alongside her as she laughs her way through not understanding what the hell's going down, so that's going to be popping up over Lawhammer on the Tuesdays. And obviously this Friday, assuming that the gods don't throw something else utterly random at us. So far, Nurgle has thrown plagues and we've had storms of all kinds. Last Friday, we literally had red warning storms everywhere as parts of my roof were getting blown off. Assuming that the gods allow us, we will be finally back with Lawhammer after what feels like almost 5 years away. And as I opened the stream with, we have all manner of cool shit that we're going to be using out on our table, and a new map cam as well that I'm very keen to be using. So that will be this Friday. Please be this Friday. That'll be this Friday. 7 p.m. UK time.
We'll have something next Wednesday as well, which will be my actual real birthday.
Yeah,
just so happens.
That'll be fun.
So the 5th of February, we'll do something fun. I don't know. I'll think of some stupid shit. But anyway, that's going to be us for today. Hope you all have a lovely time. Thanks for joining us. And this turned out better than I was genuinely worried about because Arbaal didn't have a lot. So
it was good.
We made it work. All right. We'll see you guys later. Bye.
All right. Thanks all. Bye-bye.